for overtime. Mark Grandy, Kyle Madsen, and Sterling Bennett with analysis, sound from the locker room, and your reaction to the game. When the clock hits 0, we bring you overtime. Take it away, boys.
Well, week 2 in Minnesota.
The ball at their own
didn't go that well for the 49ers. Final minute coming off of the clock right now as the Minnesota Vikings recovered the onside kick. The final score will be Minnesota Vikings 23, San Francisco 49ers 17. The Niners fall to 1-1 in 2024. Sam Darnold, who was the Niners' backup a year ago, gets revenge, and he improves along with the Minnesota Vikings to 2-0. Welcome into overtime here on 95.7 The Game. It's Mark Randy and Sterling Bennett with you. Kyle Madsen off this week. He'll be back next week for our Week 3 edition of Overtime. But Sterling, first of all, happy Sunday. I hope you're doing well considering what this Niner game was, because they fall by 6, 23-17. Sterling, that was one of the more ugly 49er games in recent memory. It was not smooth from the beginning. They had a shot late, but they just could not get a stop on the defensive end down the stretch. Not to say the defense was poor, but 23-17 was the final. Ugly performance for the 49ers, and they certainly deserve to lose this one, Sterling.
The Niners lost on every single front. The offensive line was getting beat nonstop. Purdy was having interceptions and the ball falling out of his hand before he actually threw the ball. Like, what's going on? Fred Warner was really the only player that came to play. Kittle had a nice game before he got hurt. Debo has a nice box score, but it wasn't a great game from Debo's standpoint.
Yeah, there's some garbage yards down the stretch there.
Exactly. And you know, this game was pitiful. It was, okay, you know, when are they going to get going? Eventually, they should be able to find something that works, and give credit to Brian Flores and the Vikings. Brian Flores continues to be one of the most underrated defensive minds in football. We know last year beat San Francisco in Minnesota. This team can still not find a way to win in Minnesota since 1992.
Crazy.
And this is supposed to be one of the greatest rosters in the NFL. Currently, I get no CMC, Kittle's on and off the field, this, that, and the other. Even without CMC, you should beat a team like the Vikings that had to sign like 7 cornerbacks before week 1. Losing a game like this when you're a game ahead of the Rams and you're tied with Seattle, when you have a terrible, tough road and grueling end of your year, you have to win games like this. San Francisco literally and figuratively fumbled this one away.
Yeah, they did, and we'll get into, you know, what this means down the stretch and the McCaffrey injury, and we have so much time to do that with you guys all afternoon long here on Overtime, and you can give us a call. This show's for you guys. This show's for the Niner fans, so give us a call. You're frustrated. You're not alone. I guarantee you that. Give us a call, 888-957-9570. But you're right, Sterling. Part of the reason why I think a lot of Niner fans, and I was in this camp, felt maybe as good as you possibly could with the reigning offensive player of the year missing at least the first 5 weeks of the season, was because this was by far the easiest part of your schedule by a mile. And you feel like, okay, there's a legitimate chance you could be 5-0 without McCaffrey. Like, you legitimately could do that. Now, you've got the Rams on the road. That's going to be a challenge with or without McCaffrey. We know that, but there was a chance that could have happened. But as you look further down the road, you've got tough opponents week after week after week. That's a conversation for a little bit later on today, Sterling, and we will certainly get into that. But again, 888-957-9570, the 209 already chiming in on the Xfinity mobile text line. We're keeping an eye on our YouTube chat, as always, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. But Sterling, this game began ugly for the 49ers. They did not score until just out of the 2-minute warning in the first half. It was a George Kittle touchdown catch and run on a little screen just inside of the 2-minute warning at the end of the first half. Got the Niners within 3. The Vikings did go down to close the first half with the field goal, and they scored first to begin the second half, although both teams traded failed drives to begin the second half. But this was also a moment, Sterling, where you talked about the interception by Purdy, which was not a good one. The fumble, it was originally ruled an interception, but changed to a fumble because, as you said, the ball slipped out of his hands and then was just scooped out of the air by a Viking defender. Those turnovers were big. There was a blocked punt. There was a muffed punt. The muffed punt the Niners ultimately fell on, so it didn't hurt them terribly. But the next play, I believe, was the interception that then led to a touchdown on the next play by the Vikings. So that didn't really help you much at all. But this game could have been entirely different, Sterling, if the 49ers in the first half, down by 7 points, if they go down the field, they get on the doorstep of the end zone. They already converted on 1 4th down. They go for it on 4th and goal from the 2, and they call a slow developing play out to the left out of the shotgun. It gets knocked down at the line of scrimmage, incomplete. A couple of plays later, Justin Jefferson, a 97-yard touchdown catch and run. You have George Odom matched up one-on-one on the best receiver in the NFL. I don't know about that, but Sterling, we're going to spend so much time talking about all of the mistakes, and there were so many of them. If there's one different play, that 4th and goal from the 2-yard line, you get into the end zone instead of turning it over on downs, you could be looking at this being a win, despite how terrible this team played. There's so many plays, one moment here and there like that changed the game, and that one in the first half, the 4th and goal from the 2, that got deflected at the line, was really that first inflection point of this game, followed up by that deep pass to Jettas. That turned the game on its head, and the Niners never really recovered from that.
They just came out flat. It felt like they were okay. First road game of the season. You're not at home. Last week, the vibes were high. No CMC. Who cares? Mason's having a great game. Career high. Debo's out there crushing it. You're feeling good. You're celebrating. Me and you and Kyle are on after the show going, this seems still going to be amazing. They reminded everybody who they were last week. And today it's like, I don't know what this offense is without Christian McCaffrey. And take that even further. Last week, they won a game. There's going to be some more inconsistencies without CMC, sure. He's one of the most important players on the offense in the entire NFL. My biggest issue with the offense today was the offensive line was atrocious. The Vikings, who disguise blitzes left and right, they'll bring 8, they'll drop 8, they'll show you so many different looks. Brock Purdy looked like he had never seen a defense like this before, and he already lost to him last year. This is the first time Brock Purdy has lost to the same team in consecutive games, which sounds insane to say, but it looked like Flores was in Purdy's mind all day. And where is Brandon Aiyuk? You want to hold out the whole offseason. You want to hold out. You want $30 million, and you get $30 million. Great, Brandon. Good for you. I'm so happy. But when you openly tell the entire world, I made it harder than it needed to be, and the first 2 games, you are invisible outside of one goal line catch that you almost dropped. If you want to not have Christian McCaffrey for 6+ weeks now, which seems to be the case because how bad the injury is, you need players like Kittle, who was fine today, Debo, who was fine today. Those guys did their part. We need Brandon Aiyuk out there. We talked about drafting Ricky Pearsall. I get his circumstances are obviously going to keep him off the field. But we know Purdy and Aiyuk are intertwined with their chemistry. When that's gone, when you don't have the one guy on the entire offense that can actually separate against a bad secondary, and he wants to be $30 million, 2 catches, 3 catches here, that's not going to cut it, and you're going to lose games like this. Stars have to step up against a bad Vikings team.
Yeah, maybe this Vikings team is a little bit better than we thought. They're not one of the best teams in the NFC.
The defense is for sure.
We know that for sure. Yeah, you're right. And you're right. They did a great job defensively. Brian Flores, who's been in the news more so lately for how he treated Tua Tagovailoa when he was the Dolphins head coach and how he's coaching up this Vikings defensive unit, kind of goes a little bit under the radar. You're right. He's an awesome defensive mind, and he made the Niners offensive line look like the JV offensive line. It was not good for the 49ers offensive line in this game. The Minnesota Vikings racked up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sacks of Brock Purdy. 2, there was 4 different players had sacks. 1 had a couple of different sacks, but 5 sacks in total. And it makes me think, makes me want to ask you this question, Sterling, because I'm watching this game, and obviously you focus on the interception by Brock Purdy, and that was where he was targeting Kyle Juszczyk over the middle, and it was in the deep in their own territory, so it was a bad turnover. And he threw it a little bit late. Linebacker came over and deflected it as he read Purdy's eyes, deflected it into the air, bobbled around for a second before the Vikings ultimately pick it off. And then he kind of had the weird one where he was, rearing back to pass and the ball slipped out of his hands and ultimately gets plucked out of the air. 2 bad turnovers. We're going to remember those. Throws for 319, 1 touchdown, 28 for 36 with those 2 turnovers. Sterling, I didn't think Brock Purdy was that bad today. It obviously wasn't pretty, and it wasn't one of his best games, but you consider the pressure that he was under nearly 24/7. You consider the fact that, as you're talking about, Brandon Aiyuk not separating from anybody down the field right now. We know Deebo Samuel generally isn't a separator in terms of routes. George Kittle doing George Kittle things. He's more so going to be schemed open, and he can make tough catches, and he does that. But considering, I think, what Brock Purdy had access to today, Sterling, the offensive line playing poorly and his receivers not giving him big windows to throw the ball to, I don't think Purdy was that bad. We're gonna circle the 2 turnovers, and those 2 turnovers were bad, no doubt about it. I didn't think Brock Purdy was the reason the Niners lost this game. Now, he also didn't put them on his back and lead them to a victory. I didn't think Purdy was so terrible. In fact, I thought it was relatively similar to what he did last game. And it's an entirely different game, the way it all played out. I didn't think Brock Purdy was so bad, but you're right. It still wasn't by any stretch a great performance by Brock either.
We have not seen the best of Brock Purdy so far in 2024. He was good against the Jets. He wasn't great, but again, when you're told you're not going to have your best offensive player for the next 5, 6, 7+ weeks, maybe not till after the bye week, your quarterback has to play better. And of course, was he terrible in this game? Was he dog dookie, if you want to call it that? No, he wasn't. But he wasn't good by any means. 2 turnovers, 1 may have been a fluke. Okay, fine. But there were times early in this game he was staring down Deebo Samuel. There were he was forcing throws to Kyle Juszczyk. You're like, I don't know how you got away with that, but don't do it again. He tries it again and then does get picked off. I'm okay with Purdy having full control of the offense. He's shown enough to have that, but through 2 games this year, the Jets game was fine, but this game in particular, I think was, despite what the box score might tell you, 319 yards, 28 for 36, and a touchdown pass. This was, every time he drops back, I may have faith they'll pull this out, but I'm also holding my breath saying, okay, what's going to happen this next throw? Which hasn't happened really much under Brock Purdy's tenure as starting quarterback. And I still love Brock. We all love Brock here. He's a great quarterback and going to get paid a lot of money. But you need more from scoring 17 points against the Vikings defense. That's not going to cut it. You cannot score 17 points against the Brian Flores defense, which is good, fine, cool, whatever. But then the Rams next week, this is not the look you want to have against a divisional opponent next week. You better hope you bounce back. You better hope, mine goes in the next 4 or 5 weeks. You have Dallas in Seattle on Thursday night. Kansas City, those games are far away, sure. A lot can happen in between that, fine, it's week 2. But my mind goes to, in a conversation of best of the best, Brock Purdy has not shown so far in 2 weeks to be the best quarterback on the field. Sam Darnold outplayed him today. He was more efficient and more effective. That's not a good look.
Yeah, Darnold, 17 for 26, 268, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Of course, one of those touchdowns was the 97-yard bomb to Justin Jefferson. In a day full of frustrating moments and plays, Sterling, I don't know if that was the most frustrating one. It's certainly in the top 3 because there were a lot of them.
Yeah.
But the 49ers, they just put together a gigantic drive. They got the ball at their own 10-yard line. They go 15 plays, 88 yards, all the way down to the 2. They decide to go for it on 4th and goal from the 2, which, by the way, I like that from Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah.
His team was down 7-0 at the time. And this came after he went for it on fourth down just across midfield earlier in that drive. Went for it there as well and got it. I like going for it, but fourth and goal from the 2, and you come out of the shotgun, interestingly enough, and you throw it to the left. Pressure comes right in Brock Purdy's face, untouched, because Trent Williams, not Trent's fault, his job was to go out, kick out to the left, and it allowed the down lineman on the left side to come through untouched, forced the throw early. It gets deflected, incomplete for Juwan Jennings, turnover on downs. And you think, okay, that's frustrating, but the defense now has the Vikings backed up. You can maybe get a safety. At worst, you force a punt and you gotta keep your field position, and all right, you go down and score a touchdown afterwards, and it's all good. No, what happens? You match up George Odom on the best receiver in the NFL when Mooney Ward was standing right next to him, Sterling. George Odom and Mooney Ward were standing side by side. The Niners were like, that's Justin Jefferson? George Odom, who didn't even play like any defensive snaps last year, did some, not a lot. We're going to have him guard the best wide receiver in the NFL. And then, oh, by the way, we have our second-year safety, Jair Brown, as the only help for George Odom, and Jair Brown takes a terrible route, maybe underestimates Jetta's speed. He'll never do that again, I would hope, and both of them get run past for a 97-yard touchdown. It's a 14-point swing, and at that point, Sterling, is the first moment I got a pit in my stomach thinking, oh man, the Niners are going to lose this game. There were other moments, other more frustrating moments, but a 97-yard touchdown to the guy that you have circled, the guy that you spent all week preparing for. And by the way, an awesome throw by Sam Darnold in his own end zone. And Kevin O'Connell having the courage to make that play call. Sam Darnold, the guy who was seeing ghosts a few years ago, throwing from his own end zone, airing it out to Justin Jefferson. 97 yards later, the Vikings add on to their lead, go up by even more. That moment, just one of the more frustrating moments, Sterling, in a game that was full of so many of those kind of moments.
What's frustrating, too, is you can justify almost every decision that was made by Kyle Shanahan. He went forward on, fourth down 3 times in this game. Now, I would never in my life, I am firmly against calling a shotgun pass on 4th and 1. Put them puppies in I formation. Let Juszczyk lead the way, and you get Mason some free yards. Jordan Mason ran for 5 yards a pop. It can't get you 1 yard in the red zone. Quarterback, sneak it if you have to. Do something else. Now, you could argue that had that pass not been tipped, it was a pretty nicely placed ball. The trajectory was probably going to be a touchdown, but that's all what ifs and who knows. But, sometimes you do the right thing and the outcome just is completely wrong. Now, I will say this, that San Francisco's secondary today, Mooney Ward was not containing the edge, got beat a handful of times. Isaac Yiadom was getting chewed up out there in that last drive of the game where you had 2 third downs, a 3rd and 8 and a 3rd and 7 to hopefully get your offense the ball back to win this game. And they couldn't do, to quote Jim Mora, diddly poo on defense. It was like, come on, boys. You got to do something out there. The offense isn't great. Fred Warner was picking them up every step of the way. And it was like, okay, you got a shot. It might be ugly. It might not be what you want to talk about come Monday or after the game. But, a win's a win, whatever. Get out and stay alive. This is a game where you get out, and what do you take away from this game that's positive? Oh, Fred Warner, that's it. That's it.
We already knew that. Hurt. We already knew about Fred Warner.
Right. It's nothing new. Do you bench George Odom? Do you rush back Hufanga? A lot of the issues today, my question was in that last drive, let's see what Nick Sorensen is made of. And he got out coached. Now, he had those guys in 3rd down twice. And Yiadom got beat. There was a bunch wide receivers, and I just couldn't figure out the coverage. When you have young safeties, someone's got a point. Look, you got to be here. You got to be here. I was screaming, communicate, communicate. Someone say something. Don't be like Marco Luciano and Tyler Fitzgerald in the infield.
Oh.
I want you communicating. Come on, boys.
Baseball season's over, Sterling. You don't got to bring that up.
Been over for 3 months. Who cares? But today it was it felt like San Francisco had a fog over their brain. Sometimes you wake up, you don't feel great, your brain's foggy. The entire game felt like that for San Francisco, and you just can't do that when you play once a week.
Yeah, how about this on the Xfinity Mobile text line from the 707? And join the conversation. Shoot us a text or give us a call, 888-957-9570. It's overtime. Mark Randy, Sterling Bennett with you. Kyle Madsen will be back next week. Vikings beat the Niners 23-17, but Sterling on the Xfinity Mobile text line again from the 707. We were talking about the offensive line a little bit ago. The 707 says you can't blame the offensive line when you have Trent Williams and Mason doing his thing. No, it doesn't hold water. You're right in terms of the run game. The run game worked. I mean, Mason had 20 carries, 100 yards, second consecutive game to begin the year with 100 or more yards for Jordan Mason, 5 yards a pop, had a 22-yard scamper, had a touchdown that got the Niners back in the game in the second half, believing, hey, maybe they could sneak out of here with the win. Ultimately, they did not. The run game, though, Sterling, for the most part, was good, but there's two phases to offensive line play. There's run blocking and there's pass blocking. Run blocking was fine. I don't think it was as good as it was against the Jets last week, but the pass blocking was a major, major issue. You allow 5 sacks in this game, and it felt like those sacks for the Vikings all came at huge moments. You could give the Niners run blocking grade a passing grade, but their pass blocking grade, certainly not passing. It was ugly all game long.
And this is one of the bigger things for me is what you can't do is you can't praise Trent Williams last week, who played week 1, missed almost no snaps and was phenomenal against the Jets, and then say, oh, well, you had Trent out there and he was fine. Trent was not great today. Was he good? Sure. But he wasn't great. McKivitz got beat a handful of times. Aaron Banks got beat. Jake Brendel, on a play that didn't even matter, was shoved to the ground again back-to-back weeks. It's like, dude, Jake, you're 32, 33 years old, man. You got to hold firm, my friend. And, it's like you can't praise San Francisco and go ho-hum last week and kind of forget about or just not mention the bad things that happened. We nitpicked last week. Well, this week, all the nitpicks have become like, these are issues that you got to clean up. And it was a great win last week, but this week it's ugly. This is a game where you walk back to the plane with your head down saying like, what was that? I don't know what to do. Where do we go from here? We got the Rams in 7 days. Hope that pans out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it gets tougher now. You got the Rams, although the Rams are dealing with so many injuries themselves. You don't really know exactly what team you're going to get, and they still have to play here in week number 2, so we'll see if they do pick up any other injuries. They're playing right now, in fact, in the first quarter in Arizona, and they're down 7-0. Marvin Harrison Jr. has his first touchdown in the NFL from Kyler Murray. Keep an eye on that game as we go. There is one other game on right now before the 1:25 afternoon window kicks off. Sterling, the Las Vegas Raiders are about to upset the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore.
Just win, baby.
You had me in MLB mode there for a second, but there's 1 second left on the clock. Baltimore's going to have to go Hail Mary here and see if they could pull off a miracle. But the Raiders, barring that miracle, are going to go into Baltimore and upset the Ravens. So at least if that score holds, you're not the most embarrassing Super Bowl contender performance of the week, because losing at home to the Raiders is certainly worse than losing on the road to the Minnesota Vikings, and the Ravens are pulling off some trickeration. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. But it does not.
Dallas.
Dallas also was very, very bad. You're right. That was an ugly performance for Dallas.
44-19.
New Orleans has the best offense in the NFL apparently through 2 weeks, which is something that I was not expecting. Derek Carr, MVP, is the leader after 2 weeks. But all of that, Sterling, does not excuse what we saw from the 49ers here. It was a very slow start, and we've seen them have slow starts, Sterling, and sometimes they turn it on late second quarter. They dominate the third. They control the game, and ultimately they win by a score or 10 points, and they dominate the final 2.5 quarters of the game. It did not happen, though. The offense never got into a rhythm. I think a big part is exactly what you're talking about with the offensive line. I also thought the defense, while it wasn't great, and that 97-yard touchdown to Justin Jefferson is inexcusable. That can never happen. The defense also largely was put in bad spots. Often the blocked punt. And by the way, Mitch Wishnowsky, what are you doing? Just touch him down, bro, and you'll save yourself 20 yards. They stood tall there and forced a field goal. That was the first score of the game. That's a plus for the defense. They didn't deserve to give up any points there. They gave up 3. Then the Brock Purdy interception turned into 7 points immediately the other way. And by the way, 14 of the Niners' 17 points, Sterling, came off of turnovers forced by Fred Warner in the defense. So, the defense was the Niners' offense as well, kind of, in this game. I thought the defense, for the most part, they had a couple of terrible mistakes, but it was the offense putting them in rough situations, putting them in bad spots that really hurt them. I thought the defense played well enough despite a major breakdown and some really tough third and long conversions in the fourth quarter by Darnold and the Vikings. Overall, though, I thought the defense played well enough to get a win. It was the offense just not holding up there end of the bargain.
I would agree. The defense today, although I don't think they played stellar, they played good enough to win, like you said. They got 2 turnovers. The turnover battle was even. It almost wasn't, thanks to Jacob Cowling and Isaac Gadum, but it was not great. Special teams is still somehow, despite how much money they pour into punters and gunners and punt returners and they draft players, is still an issue. Demetrius Flanagan-Falls watching the guy run right by him for a punt block. Cowling, fumbling the football. It's like, you can't do this. That's why San Francisco is keeping 7 wide receivers on the active roster, because Ronnie Bell can go out there and field punts. And right when the fumble happened to Cowling, I said, hey, he's not playing next week. Shanahan saying, get in the doghouse. You're not going to see any snaps. But you're right, Mark. The defense played well enough to win, whereas the offense just continued to stumble over and over itself. Every pivotal third down, even their scoring drives, felt like you had to pull teeth just to convert on fourth down. It was like, this is San Francisco's offense that has an all-pro Brandon Aiyuk and an all-pro Deebo Samuel and an all-pro tight end and CMC, but this offense should still be able to move the football continually, even against good defenses. And today, it couldn't move the ball at all.
Yeah. It was ugly. 17 points for the Niner offense. They fall by 6. 23-17, the final score. The Vikings are 2-0. The Niners fall to 1-1. And Minneapolis continues to be like a house of horrors for the 49ers. They have not won on the road against the Vikings since 1992. If you can believe it. That was before Sterling and I were on this earth. The Niners have not won in our lifetimes in the state of Minnesota since Sterling and I have been born, and that did not change today. Gotta take a quick break, but first, shout out to Diego Sanchez on our YouTube chat, powered by First NorCal Credit Union, a super chat, $5. Diego says, those unlucky tips, not converting a 4th and goal on the 1, but allowing Sam Icy Ghost Darnold a 90-yard touchdown made me sick. On to Levi South, beat LA, says Diego. We certainly hope that's the case coming up next week. Diego for the Niners down in LA against the Rams. All right, time for a break here on Overtime. When we come back, so much more to get into, and we want to hear from you. Give us a call, 888-957-9570. Plus, we will hear from Kyle Shanahan. He has addressed the media. We'll get that to you before we get on out of here today as well. Niners fall to the Vikings. 23-17 is the final. More Overtime with Grandy and Sterling next on 95.7 The Game.
Are you curious about who offers the best deals on top-rated Samsung, LG, and Sony TVs? The answer is surprising. It's not online, and it's not the warehouse clubs. The best deal.
Darnold getting messy, going deep, and he's got Jefferson. He's got Jefferson. It's a foot race downfield with Brown. Shifting gears. Getting a block. That's 6. 97 yards. Holy smokes.
Now back to overtime with Grandy, Madsen, and Bennett with sounds from the locker room and your calls at 888-957-9570. Overtime continues now.
That was the great Kevin Harlan calling the 97-yard touchdown catch. Sam Darnold to Justin Jefferson. That was a 14-point swing. Sterling, the 49ers were about to go down and take a lead, actually. I think I said earlier it was 7-0 Vikings at that point. It was only 3-0 Vikings at that point. Niners put together a 15-play drive. They get all the way down to the 2-yard line. Shanahan decides, you know what? Today I'm going to be aggressive. I loved it. Went for it. Not the greatest play call. It gets knocked down, incomplete, and then a couple of plays later, 97-yard house call for Justin Jefferson. So Sterling, instead of you being up 7-3, up by 4 points, you're down 10-0, down 10 points. Now, the Niners did ultimately get kind of a 14-point swing back later on. Aaron Jones was about to step into the end zone to make it a 20-point lead for the Vikings. And then Fred Warner, making a habit of pulling off the peanut punch to perfection, knocked it away. Isaac Yiadom recovered the fumble. Second time he recovered a loose ball, by the way, in this game, which is never a good thing. If you're recovering multiple balls, I guess generally if it's on defense, it's good. But the other one came on special teams that was muffed by the rookie Jacob Cowing. That was not great. But the Niners turned that Fred Warner forced turnover on the doorstep of the end zone into 7 points themselves. So you kind of gained a 14-point swing back yourself, but it's hard to overcome all the mistakes the 49ers made. The turnovers, the blocked punt, the muffed punt, the bad field position, the big plays, all the third and long conversions for the Vikings. Sterling, after the 49ers scored the touchdown, the Jordan Mason run to make it a 6-point game early in the fourth quarter, the Vikings' ensuing drive, when their only goal was to take a lot of time off the clock and get any kind of score to make it a 2-possession game, they had conversions of like 3rd and 9 and 3rd and 7 and 3rd and 5 over and over and over again. Ultimately, I don't think the defense was bad, but on those money downs, on those big moments, they just simply could not get off the field, and they did not give the offense the chance they needed to win the game down the stretch.
We've been talking a lot about not having Christian McCaffrey for the offense. Why couldn't San Francisco's offense do what the Vikings did without Justin Jefferson? In fact, they didn't have Jefferson, Jordan Addison, or TJ Hawkinson, and they marched the ball down the field at will against the Niners defense that on paper is supposed to be a top 10, top 5 unit, depending on how you look at it. They didn't have 3 of their top offensive players, and they marched down the field, and arguably, compared to last year, with the worst quarterback. It felt like they had no issues at all moving down the field when they had to, which makes the offensive issues so much more staggering. Mickey D on the YouTube chat brought to you by First NorCal Credit Union says, D needed a stop, and instead, Minnesota drove the field without Jefferson. Yes!
Yep.
They didn't have their star.
And Aaron Jones wasn't even on the field either. It was Ty Chandler in the game at running back. And okay, so I talked about the third down conversions. 3rd and 7. They converted that one with Brandon Powell. Do you know Brandon Powell? I don't really know Brandon. I know a Bilal Powell. Brandon Powell, didn't really know about him. A 3rd and 8 conversion. That one was to Naylor. Ken, our guy here behind the glass, said, Naylor, is that a rookie? No, he's a third-year guy I'd never heard of. I thought he was a rookie, too. Conversion
I know
there.
Josh Naylor in Cleveland.
More baseball references. That's what we need here, dealing with this Niner loss. And then 3rd and 2.
Let's avoid the loss.
3rd and 2, another conversion to Brandon Powell again. Like, they did it with not nobodies. I'm not disrespecting these guys, but they did it with, you're
scraps.
Right, not their
It's
stars.
scraps.
And these were wide open plays. Like Brandon Powell on the right sideline, that 3rd and 7, there was no one within a mile of him. He was so wide open. Darnold was good, and he made the Niners pay, but it was also some pretty laxed coverage by the secondary on that final drive, and I get it. you're gassed, you're winded a little bit. The Niners actually won the time of possession, nearly 35 minutes to 25 minutes for the Vikings. This was not like last week. Like the Niners weren't out there a ton on the defensive side. But they just didn't have a lot in the tank. And I guess you could also maybe point to, a short week and you're traveling to a different time zone and it's an early kickoff. Your body clock feels like 10 o'clock in the morning. To those guys, it feels like noon out there in Minnesota. That's all part of it. You're right. And that's all fair, but you're right, Sterling, saying this was a top 5 defensive unit. It should be a top 5 defensive unit. And you saw flashes. Nick Bosa, a couple of sacks, his first 2 sacks of the season. Fred Warner had a sack and 2 forced turnovers, 1 interception, 1 forced fumble. He was awesome, but in those big moments, they came up a little bit short on that. And that was one of the reasons why the Niners lost today.
There were times in this game when I was praying Fred Warner was going to be the one around the football. Because I knew if it wasn't him, nothing else was going to happen. Like, Mooney Ward was bad. Lenore was not great. Yadam was getting eaten alive in the last drive of the game. The safeties weren't good. And the safeties were so bad, they benched George Odom for like 3 or 4 drives in that second half. Malik Mustafa got a handful of snaps in that third and fourth quarter. So there may be some positional changing happening on the depth chart, maybe come week 3 against the Rams, who are, I think, getting beat 14-0 currently against the Cardinals. So there is some good news for some Niner fans. But yeah, like, it's almost like, not to use baseball again, but you're praying in a big moment that your fourth hole hitter is going to come up and make the play, make the big hit. I was just praying and hoping, where's Fred Warner? Where is Fred Warner? He has to be the one, and he did twice. In fact, I'm pretty sure he had 3 forced fumbles in this game. I'm not sure if the one about Sam Darnold towards the sideline was actually a fumble, but if it wasn't, it was as close as you can get. But the Vikings offense essentially won this game with players like Chris Conley and Ronnie Bell on their offense. That should never happen. And for Kyle Shanahan, I don't know about you, Mark, and maybe you differ on me with this, but I'm tired of seeing Deebo Samuel on these fake screens, end arounds, when your guys can't separate downfield. And I feel like for 10 to 20 plays this game, he's in the backfield or on the sideline being like the last option if no one's there. They're just going to put a linebacker out there and sit and say, hey, we dare you to throw it to him. You're almost taking away your best playmaker out of the play when you already don't have Christian McCaffrey. How does that work? You need him downfield, making plays, slants. They can be short routes, but not have him 7 yards behind the quarterback saying, hey, I'm open. Of course you're open. They want you to throw it to him. It's a loss of yards every time.
Yeah. Yeah, to clean up a couple of things, you're right about Fred Warner. He had 2 forced fumbles. One of them turned into a turnover forced by the Niner defense. He also deflected a couple of passes, had an interception, had a quarterback hit, had a sack, had 9 total tackles to lead the team. He was absolutely incredible. Nick Bosa, 5 tackles, 2 of them were sacks. He was very good as well. Givens got in there for a sack. Other than that, not a lot of standouts from the Niners defense. And then what you're talking about with Deebo Samuel, you look at the stat line, and this is kind of what we're talking about. Stat lines can fool you, and it's not that Deebo Samuel was bad. I think this is more about the game plan and how the Niners are attacking than what the numbers are for an individual player. Deebo finishes with 10 targets, 8 catches for 110 yards. He had 2 carries, lost 10 total yards on those 2 carries. One of them was the awkward play down at the very end where they were trying to get it out to Deebo quick on the right side. The ball was deflected at the line into the air, and Deebo, I get it, in the moment it's hard to think. Instead of just knocking it down, he caught it and lost like 9 yards. It took a lot of time off the clock, hurt the Niners' chances. Ultimately, they don't get the onside kick anyway, so it didn't really matter. But I think what you're getting at, Sterling, and where I agree with you is, isn't Deebo, 8 catches, 110, that's fine. Now, some of those were those garbage time drives down the stretch where he had like a 20-yard reception and a 15-yard reception on that final drive when the Vikings were content giving those chunks underneath over the middle. I thought Deebo Samuel should be getting, 8 carries out of the backfield in this game. Just give him the ball, maximize the number of times that he can make something happen. We saw it a little bit against the Jets. Not a ton of success for him in terms of chunk plays on the ground. I'm also a little bit worried now that McCaffrey's out for a month or more about Jordan Mason's workload. Take a little bit off of him, give a little bit more to Deebo, maybe use Deebo less in the receiving game, but I get why maybe you might not want to do that because Aiyuk clearly isn't up to full speed just yet. You got to rely on someone like Chris Conley who had a catch in this game. I get why maybe there's a little bit of a give and take for Shanahan in terms of how to attack, but I think overall, Sterling, I'm with you. I expected more manufactured touches from Deebo in the backfield, on screens, on end arounds, on simple handoffs, and we didn't get that. He was used a little bit more like a prototypical wide receiver, which is fine, but the way that this game was going, I think maybe it called for a little bit more of just giving the ball to your most dynamic offensive weapon, and it didn't really happen a lot in those manufactured ways in this game.
So do we put the blame on the offense on Kyle, or is it just players not executing? Because it felt like there were some plays in this game that were wasted. There was that play again, it's down at the goal line, the game's almost over, the Deebo Samuel play where the ball gets tipped, almost picked off, and he catches it when he should have batted it down. But that's a play where the opposing defense knows you want to give the ball to Deebo Samuel, which is fine. Usually Deebo's great at even dicing through those defenses, but the screen passes to Deebo have not worked. You've seen opposing defenses just say, rush everybody towards him because that's where the ball's going. Honestly, what I want to see at this point is Kyle fake the Deebo screen, take a shot downfield. There was, walking into this game, I thought to myself, the Vikings truly do not have a number one cornerback. Yeah, there's Stephon Gilmore, but other than that, he's old. He's like 33 years old. He's fine. Take a few shots downfield. Give me a deep shot to Aiyuk. Just try something to get them on their heels early, which opens up other stuff. It didn't happen, but when you do that, it opens up the Deebo underneath. Nothing in this game opened up Deebo Samuel underneath. Everything from Purdy was 16 yards, 25 yards, which is great stuff. You want to see that, but that's not exactly what Kyle wants to do all the time. He wants to give Deebo the ball 6 yards deep and let him get 7 by himself.
Yeah.
There was no opportunity to eat the clock in this game like they did against the Jets a week ago. To me, the game plan, it was kind of like, okay, a pass-heavy game plan made sense to me. The secondary is not great in Minnesota, but it's like after that, they couldn't do anything. There was nothing that actually worked in this game minus a George Kittle 4-yard touchdown catch.
Yeah, I think there was the Niners pride themselves so much on being more physical than everybody else, and we're just going to run the ball down your throat, and if we have success running the ball, we are perfectly content doing that over and over and over again. Week 1 against the Jets was a great example of it. And so many people, I think, kind of hated on Brock Purdy's performance just simply because he wasn't asked to do that much week 1 against the Jets. When he was asked to do things, I thought he was largely very good. He just wasn't asked to do all that much. You go back to NFC Championship game, Jimmy Garoppolo 2019, when Raheem Mostert ran for 250 yards. That is the best example of this. If it's working on the ground, the Niners are perfectly content doing nothing else. But where the Niners offense, Sterling, has evolved, and this is most recently with Brock Purdy and with Christian McCaffrey, those two deserve, I think, a lot of the credit for why this is now possible, is the Niners are the best chunk play offense in the NFL, consistently getting 25, 30, 35, 40 yards on single plays. And some of it is, not necessarily trick plays, but end arounds and screens and quick throws. And then the Yak Bros take over and turn it into big gains. But how many times is Aiyuk running free down the left sideline? How many times is Kittle open over the middle and he runs for 20 more yards and turns it into a gain of 50? Same thing for Deebo Samuel, even Juwan Jennings here and there. There was even a play last year where it happened with Ray McCloud. That is what happens with this offense, and that was not at all the case today. Now, if you're asking, is it understandable? You're without McCaffrey, the reigning offensive player of the year. Brandon Aiyuk, a all-pro wide receiver last year, clearly not up to speed yet, and we can be frustrated at him that is his current reality. But as we try to handicap the ability of the offense right now, Sterling, it is also relatively clear that this is not the same group as it was last year because of injury, because of other circumstances, but it just goes to show how much more difficult it is to get those kind of things done, put up those kind of numbers when you don't have those plays down the field. And so much of what was today's offense was underneath, over the middle and short, in front of the defense, and there was nothing open deep down the field. And there were very few even attempts to push the ball deep down the field.
When it feels like Brandon Aiyuk hasn't played football in 7 months, a couple catches today, but where's separation? Yeah, that stuff takes time, but Peyton Manning last week made it the point on the Manning cast to say, get your butt in the room on the field. And you never want to point to one player and say it's your fault. That's not how football is played. But you know what helped right now? Having Brandon Aiyuk through the entire offseason program getting open against the bad secondary. This is a game where, take last year as an example, Aiyuk was dicing up almost every defense he faced. Against the Vikings last year, even without Deebo Samuel, he was still the guy on the majority of plays because Brock knows he's always going to be open. And you don't have that. It hinders your offense. Now, should it hinder it to 17 points? No, it shouldn't. But you cannot score 17 points and expect to win football games. My mind goes to next week against the Rams, which it's 7 days away. Who knows what could happen? There's still games being played today, including the Rams against the Cardinals. But is Matthew Stafford not going to have his way with this defense? Which, Puka Nacua, offensive line's banked up, but okay. This game didn't prove to me you can beat everybody. You can beat anybody. It proved to me that, hey, this team may have some actual issues that were kind of masked in week number 1.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, you're talking about what's coming up next week. It is the Rams. It is now 21-0 Arizona over the Los Angeles Rams. I mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr. earlier, his first NFL touchdown. He also has another one, a 60-yard touchdown catch from Kyler Murray. And Kyler Murray has thrown for 3 touchdowns in the first 18 minutes of the game. It's 21-0 Arizona as we speak right now. We'll keep an eye on that score for you as we keep going here on Overtime on 95.7 The Game. But let's go out to the phone lines here on Overtime on 95.7 The Game. Up first is Rob in San Bruno. What's up, Rob? You're on Overtime. It's Mark, Randy, Sterling, Bennett with you. Niners fall in Minnesota. Rob, how you feeling?
Man, I don't like L's. But, I'm putting the blame on Purdy. I mean, the game was to be had. They had over 300 yards passing. They had I thought Mason ran good. He had over 100 yards rushing. I thought the Niners had full control of the game, but you had Purdy throwing interceptions. That's what it came down to. He had a couple that should have been intercepted. Purdy looked good part of the game, but you can't, in a game to where it's that close, you can't have your guy throwing 2 interceptions. I thought Fred Warner pretty much saved this game from being a blowout. If it wasn't for Fred Warner, this would be a 20-point L. So, and then we lost to Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was not perfect out there. So I just feel like our defense ain't what it was last year. I think we missed Armstead. We for sure missed Big Dre, Great Dre, Greenlaw. And Bosa, he had 2 sacks, but where was he at late making plays? He didn't make no plays late. He had a couple sacks, but he didn't stand out. I just watched the Raider game. I watched Max Crosby absolutely have one of the best games I've seen him play his whole career. And Bosa he's just there. So you can say Aiyuk not being there, but I don't think that was a problem. I thought Deebo had a great game. Deebo made a couple catches across the middle. If he didn't jump, them interceptions. So I just thought they had opportunities to win the game. Purdy threw interceptions. I thought Kyle got too cute in the goal line. You had Mason running well, but you want to throw at the one. No, you got a big back. Run the ball. So I thought the offense looked well. They just made mistakes. You can't make mistakes in a close game, and that's what they did, and they lost the game. I thought Kyle got out-coached in that third quarter as well.
Yeah, appreciate the call, Rob. I think a couple things I disagree with you about. First of all, I thought Nick Bosa was great in this game. His first 2 sacks of the year, 5 tackles. You were talking about Max Crosby. He also had 2 sacks, 6 tackles for the Raiders today. And I know we just compare box scores. Difficult to do that. It doesn't really show the full scope of their impact. I could say the same thing about Nick Bosa. He's also impacting plays where he does not make tackles on. I'm a little bit more in the defend Brock Purdy's performance camp. I think part of it also comes down to your expectations for him. Are you thinking that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL? And if you are, maybe you view this in a little bit more of a negative light. If you're a little bit unsure, if you think he's along for the ride, and I'm not saying I am, that changes how you view this. But Sterling, the one thing that Rob is 100% right about, without Fred Warner, the Niners might lose this game by like 27 points. Like, he was that big of an impact today. Fred Warner was absolutely insane, and it's kind of a fun, more like depressing thought experiment to see what it would look like without Fred. It would, at the very least, there would be 7 more points for the Vikings and 7 fewer points for the 49ers at the very least. Fred Warner was the only reason this game was even in the air at any point in the fourth quarter.
Going through the box score right now, if I told you Brock Purdy had 319 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, and a rating of 101.3, the running game had 100 yards, and Deebo Samuel had 110 yards, Kittle had 76 yards and 1 touchdown, you know what you'd say?
And you forced 2 turnovers.
You probably won the game by 14-plus points. They lost by 6. Like, this is a game last year, and look, it's early. There is a possibility that, like 2021, it's a slow start for San Francisco. Let's not forget, they are 500. It's not the end of the world. You can win the next 4 or 5 games, and no one bats an eye about week number 2 if you can win the division. But this is a game that the box score would scream, oh, San Francisco won. Meanwhile, Sam Darnold, who was only 17 for 26, was the most efficient quarterback I've seen all year. And it's only been 2 weeks, but my goodness, it's Derek Carr and Sam Darnold as the number 1 and number 2 MVP finalists so far. That shouldn't happen. And I think, what do you write when you go back to the drawing board? I don't know. You tackled pretty well. You got to cover better, not allow big plays. It's almost like everything in this game was like, yeah, we know what we're doing wrong. We know what we should be doing better, but the Vikings today were just a better team overall. Yeah, we're going to hear from Kyle Shanahan coming up on the other side. We do have time to sneak in one more call before we go to break. 888-957-9570. The Niners fall to the Vikings 23-17. Let's go back out to the phone lines. Up next is Charles, who's in Castro Valley. Charles, what's up? You're on Overtime with Grandy and Sterling. How you doing, Charles?
Fellas, I got to take a sigh and just be like, wow. But we also got to realize, too, we haven't won a game in Minnesota since 92. It's bad juju in Minnesota. So I kind of feel like, I'm not going to say throw this game away, but I feel like you're right. It is week 2. The world is not ending, but there's definitely some things that they need to fine-tune and make sure they correct. If they ever want to get back to where they were last year and win, they didn't do last year. But, the third down conversions, fellas, Bosa could have 2 sacks. Fred Warner could run around and, get fumbles and things like that, but they got to get off the field. Back in the day, did we not see a 3rd and 9 or a 3rd and 10 and Nick Bosa sacked the quarterback? They were forced to punt, and life was good as far as how the defense ran. Defense got to get off the field. Offense, I know we're going to be without CMC for a while, but honestly, I feel like we have enough weapons to be able to do more, and they got to get creative on not just on the run, but just how they scheme their plays against their opponents. But it's 1-1, fellas. We'll get over it. They're probably going to right the ship next week against the Rams, and we won't even be talking about this game. But remember, bad juju in Minnesota. Period.
Yep. Yeah, no doubt, Charles. Have not won in Minnesota against the Vikings since 1992. That is an absolutely insane stat. Now, they don't play there every single year, but still, to have not won in a single state since 1992, That is a wild, wild statistic. All right, we got to take a quick break here on Overtime. We're just getting started. We're with you all afternoon long. So give us a call. You can join the conversation as well on the Xfinity mobile text line, 888-957-9570. And I know Sterling and I keeping an eye on the YouTube chat powered by First NorCal Credit Union. It's time for a quick break. When we come back, we'll take your calls. We'll also hear from the head coach. Kyle Shanahan has addressed the media in Minnesota. His full post-game presser is coming up on the other side as well. As overtime continues, the Niners fall to the Vikings 23-17. They're 1-1 on the year. More OT next on 95.7 The Game.
Let's face it, nowadays most companies have to rely on dozens of expensive, disconnected platforms to run their business. And even then, things can get a little, well, stressful.
2nd and 11. Blocked by Kittle. Deflected, ricocheted. Metellus has picked it up. And McCollum breaking tackles. Out of bounds. Turnover.
Now back to overtime with Grandy, Madsen, and Bennett with sounds from the locker room and your calls at 888-957-9570. Overtime continues now.
Welcome back. Niners falls of the Vikings 23-17. That was one of two Niners turnovers that you heard there, called by Kevin Harlan on the NFL on CBS. Purdy threw an interception, also lost a fumble. It was kind of looked like an interception. It was originally called an interception by the broadcast crew, then later changed. The Niners also had a punt that was blocked. They also muffed one of their own punts that they ultimately fell on, but it was an ugly, ugly day all the way around for the 49ers. 23-17 was the final. Sterling, the 49ers had a game or two like this last year. I mean, last year in Minnesota was somewhat similar. There was the turnover, the fumble by Christian McCaffrey on the first possession of that game, and then Purdy, if memory serves, threw two interceptions on the final two possessions of the game to seal that for the Vikings. I think about the Bengals game, which followed that one, which was kind of an ugly performance as well. Obviously, the Ravens on Christmas is up there in terms of ugly losses. I guess I'm saying all that to say this. The Niners had some performances like this one last year, and they went all the way to overtime in the Super Bowl. So I think one of our previous callers saying it's not the end of the world. It is 100% true. But also the 49ers last year began the season 5-0, were feeling great about themselves, like the best team in the NFL. Now they get that gut punch a little bit earlier this season.
And that's the difference, right? You gave yourself some cushion. We're 5-0, we're feeling great. Then you have some upsetting kind of letdown losses in the middle of the year against the Bengals, the Browns, and the Vikings that you point to and say, hey, had we had won those games, the division or more so the conference championship wouldn't have come down to one game against the Lions and the Eagles and Dallas Cowboys. But you don't have that luxury this year. Now, you can get that luxury back by winning against the Rams and the Cardinals and the Patriots, but the Cardinals are cooking some Ram right now in Southern California. Yeah. I think it's 21-0, if not
24
more at this
to
point.
3 now. 24-3.
Like,
yeah.
Yikes. But now you're 1-1. Okay, you are 500 once again. Seattle doing pretty well this year so far through 2 weeks. The Rams may be 0-2 if all things end well there, but at this point you're going to be 1-1. Likely behind Seattle for the division at this point through 2 weeks, I might add. But this was an opportunity to build that cushion up once again. This was an opportunity to give you that, even if it wasn't 5 or 6 games and you're 4-2, whatever it may be, you have a little bit of space in between you and the second and third place teams. Well, that's kind of out the window now. Now, you can gain it back by winning the next 4 or 5 games, sure, but if the Rams are 0-2 and Seattle's 2-0 and the Cardinals are 1-1, that's not where you want to be. If you're the San Francisco 49ers, the expectations this year were you're going to be 12-5, you're going to be 11-6, you are going to be the head honcho of the NFC. You're fighting for that spot once again, whereas now it's like, not that I'm questioning, but I do have some questions, if you will, of what is this offense's identity without Christian McCaffrey and a, let's say, less than up to speed Brandon Aiyuk? I'm just not sure what it is yet outside of Jordan Mason being great for 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, and this is the part of the schedule for the Niners to get fat because you look later on, beginning October 20th, which is what? Week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, 5, 6. Week 7, you've got the Chiefs, followed by the Cowboys, then the Buccaneers. Buccaneers looking pretty good right now, by the way. They pulled off the win in Detroit, getting a little bit of revenge over their playoff loss last year in Detroit to the Lions. So you go Chiefs, Cowboys, Buccaneers, Seahawks, Packers, Bills. That is a really, really difficult 6-game stretch. You go even farther, Bears, okay, we don't really know who they are yet. They looked absolutely terrible despite winning week 1. They play tonight. And then you got the Rams, the Dolphins, and the Lions as well. Like, the back half of this schedule is extremely, extremely difficult, which is why this loss is a little bit frustrating and disappointing, because this is your opportunity to, as you laid out, give yourself a cushion to allow a loss or two, or hell, maybe even three in the back half of the season and still win the division and maybe be in the running for the number one seed in the NFC. That's how difficult the back half of this schedule is for the 49ers. We'll go to the phone lines in a second. First, though, I wanted to point out a comment from the YouTube chat powered by First NorCal Credit Union. Mentality, making sure we don't forget about some of the injuries, saying don't forget about Kittle getting carted off. The one, I think, piece of good news for the Niners in this game is it seems like they're relatively injury-free from this game. Obviously, you have the McCaffrey thing. Kittle did get carted off, but the reports are, and we'll hear from Shanahan in a second, I'm sure he addressed it. The reports are that he was just getting an IV for a cramp. He came back, returned to the game, seems fine. Bosa got rolled up on. His ankle was in a little bit of pain, walked off the field, came back in. He seems fine as well. Deebo Samuel was limping in the fourth quarter, but when is he not? That's normal. Not anything new there. Of course, you'd rather him not be. He just takes a beating time and time and time again, but he stayed in the game. He seems fine. Niners seemed ultimately healthy, as healthy as you can be after a physical football game, of course, not including Christian McCaffrey, who is on IR and will miss at least 3 more football games. So that is the piece of good news if you are a Niner fan. No new injuries, it seems, from this game. We will hear from Shanahan on that in a second. But first, back out to the phones we go. Up next is Maurice in Rancho Cordova. Maurice, what's up? You're on Overtime with Grandy and Sterling. How you doing?
Hey, man. How y'all doing?
We're doing all right. Tough loss for the Niners, though, Maurice. What about you?
Yeah, I've never had a really good feeling about this Vikings game coming in. I don't even really know who the Vikings really are. They're kind of, that they play good football. I'm interested to see what they're going to look like towards the end of the season. But I do disagree with what everybody is saying about Aiyuk, that he's not getting separation, he's not getting open. If you look at the game and you look at the plays, he's not first read. He's not even second read on some of the plays. It's amazing how Kyle can force feed the ball to Deebo and find all of these creative ways to get Deebo the ball, but you cannot force feed the guy that just got paid $30 million a year. Brandon Aiyuk used to do end arounds. He can still do bubble screens. You just don't find him a way to get him the ball. And what's weird about this, and Kyle has a quality to him to where he comes off a little bit as a rich kid. And sometimes rich kids have a certain attitude. And if you piss a rich kid off, they can make your life difficult. And it feels to me, this for just 2 games, it feels like he's being a little political with the wide receiver room as far as targets. Because how football works out is you have first read, second read, third read. Aiyuk he's running clear outs for Deebo coming across the middle. He's running clear outs for Jennings coming across the middle. He's not first read on these. So it's confusion because people are saying separation, but I don't think it's separation. I just don't think he's getting his number called right now, whether that's Kyle upset with him about what happened in the offseason or Kyle is waiting for him to get going. But we know Kyle has a tendency to put guys in the doghouse if they make him angry in any type of way. But yeah, go back and look at film. There's plenty of plays where they actually showed the replay where Aiyuk was open as well and Jennings or Deebo was open, but he wasn't the first read. So they're not looking at him first and second read. They're looking at Deebo and Jennings. So I don't know if that's going to change later in the season, but we'll see.
Appreciate the call, Marie. Sterling, what do you think of that? I mean, the idea that Kyle Shanahan is playing politics with his wide receiver room right now is absolutely not even anywhere near the front of my mind. This team at least in this game, struggling in the passing game. If you're doing that in the middle of a game where you are struggling to move the ball, this game was begging for an Aiyuk deep shot, an Aiyuk open deep down the right side of the field, 40-yard gain. It was begging for that, and it never happened. I would tend to believe the reason isn't necessarily Shanahan and his doghouse at this stage.
If there was a time to politic your receiver room, it wouldn't be in the midst of what's supposed to be the quote-unquote last dance for your offense. Can't move the football. Now, maybe it is, and sometimes Kyle can definitely give off that rich kid entitled vibe of, I know better than you, or like the caller said, if you make me angry, if you piss me off, I'm just not going to call your number for the next couple of weeks and see how you feel. Now, I think, had Christian McCaffrey been out there, you can certainly hide Brandon Aiyuk a lot more, but he had 2 drops last week. He wasn't there outside the, week before week 1 against the Jets. It's not as if like Brandon Aiyuk has been out there every single practice or even a month before week 1. I think this is more as Aiyuk really is not ready to be out there 100% just yet. And I would like to believe Kyle was like, I don't know if I truly trust you just yet, because I've seen Jennings and Debo out here every single day, haven't missed a practice. They're ready to go. You are steps behind. That'll likely change in the upcoming weeks once Aiyuk gets his bearings, but no. And if Kyle Shanahan is politicking and somewhat doghousing or putting Aiyuk in the doghouse, in week 2 of the 2024 NFL season, without Christian McCaffrey and your offense isn't moving the football, my goodness, there needs to be an intervention tonight.
Yes. If that's where we are at this stage, then it is an indictment on Kyle Shanahan and this whole system. So I feel confident in saying that's not what it is right now. The blame is, if we are going to play the blame game, the blame is more on the fact that Brandon Aiyuk is simply not with the team until just before the regular season began. Give it 3 more weeks and we can revisit it. But at this stage, I'm not believing any of that. Okay, back out to the phone.
You also don't pay a player $30 million and not target them.
Exactly.
It's the exact opposite of what you do. So it doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, it makes you look bad as the coach/GM that decided to pay him all that money.
Yes.
That ran upstairs to get John Lynch off the phone with the Steelers from pulling the trigger on the trade. No. He's going to sign $30 million a year, and then, I'm going to big brain this. I'm going to galaxy brain this and not even throw him the ball. If that's what's happening, that is a fireable offense, legitimately. Yes, and that completely. I can guarantee that is not what's happening. Okay. Back out to the phones, 888-957-9570. The Niners fall to the Vikings in Minnesota. 23-17 is the final score. Up next is Daryl, who's in Alameda. I know Daryl wants to talk about Aiyuk as well. What's up, Daryl? You're on overtime. How you doing?
Hey, guys. I just want to piggyback off the previous caller. I'm agreeing with him, but I'll take it even a step further. If you guys go and look at the game again, hopefully you'll be able to have a widescreen view of the field. Aiyuk is open numerous times, and the ball just doesn't go his way. I remember Purdy force-fed a ball to Debo in the middle of the field. Aiyuk is open on the left-hand side. He's looking around like, there's nobody by me. And Purdy goes in the traffic trying to force feed a ball. I would say, I'm not blaming it on Shanahan. I would say Purdy, he put up good numbers, but he just was not making good decisions, period. He had a bad game today, and I'm not shying away from it. It's on Purdy. Receivers can't throw the ball to themselves.
Yeah, Daryl, I mean, I think what you're talking about is fair. I will indeed have to go back and watch the tape and watch the All-22 when it comes out to see the full field and see how open Aiyuk was and how often he was open. What I also will say, Sterling, is it's football. Sometimes you're wide open and the ball doesn't find you. Like that happened last year, too, when Aiyuk was an all-pro receiver. So I don't want to overreact to, he was wide open on this one, these 2 plays, and the ball didn't come to him. That's just what happens in the NFL. Your number one read could be on the left side of the field. Aiyuk could be your 2 read in the middle or on the right. And because the 1, even if it's a shorter route and you gain less yards, is open, you throw that ball because it's your number one read and you didn't even have the opportunity to check on your 2nd or your 3rd read. Maybe you think Aiyuk should be the number 1 read more often, and we can have that argument. We can have that conversation. But oftentimes, Sterling, a receiver is open, and he doesn't get the ball simply because it's difficult to scan the whole field at once. You don't really do it that way. It's kind of the nature of how this happens, especially when you have the number of weapons the Niners have, even without Christian McCaffrey today.
There's a lot more credence to Brock Purdy simply not seeing Aiyuk or simply not throwing his way than Kyle Shanahan purposefully not wanting the offense to have a game plan with him involved.
And Purdy purposefully not throwing his way. It's just the way that the offense is set up sometimes.
And history would show you that Brock Purdy wants to throw the football Brandon Aiyuk's way. He's the most targeted receiver the past 2 years for a reason. Brock Purdy, I'm sure, would like to throw the ball to Brandon Aiyuk. I'm sure there are times Purdy looks to Aiyuk and he's not open, but nobody talks about those instances because they don't matter. Look, the fact is, Aiyuk's getting $30 million a year now. That's going to catch everyone's eye. It's not going to matter until he catches a football 6 to 8 to 10 plus times, until he is that number 1 receiver with a couple touchdowns in a game. We all say, where's Aiyuk been this whole time? Which, okay, that's fine. That's fair. And maybe they should target him more. Maybe they should look his way more. I won't even oppose that. You're paying him more than Deebo Samuel. He should likely be a higher priority in your offense, but it's 2 weeks. Didn't have an entire off season to work with. And if Brock Purdy didn't see him because he's a guy he hasn't worked out with the entire off season, maybe he feels more comfortable throwing to Deebo Samuel, throwing to Juwan Jennings. I mean, I don't want to use this comparison, but Tom Brady was a quarterback that if he didn't feel comfortable throwing your way, no matter how much you were paid or your name value, he wouldn't throw your way. I don't think Brock Purdy is using that as an example or that's how he feels, but I'm sure he wants to throw to Brandon Aiyuk almost every single snap because Aiyuk usually is open dating back to last year and previous seasons. This year, I don't think Aiyuk is wide open 90% of his snaps. You can see there are plays he's not open at all, and Purdy has to go to Deebo and Jennings and Kittle. Now, it does worry me that Kyle Juszczyk has more receptions than Brandon Aiyuk so far. That's a problem. Let's get that changed, but this is not a anti-Aiyuk narrative or the offense isn't like, you know what, Aiyuk, you're the 4th option. Let's not throw your way at all. This is much more of the offense is kind of reeling and losing Christian McCaffrey. No one's playing particularly well, and they're trying to find themselves still. Now, maybe Aiyuk can be the answer, but that's going to have to wait till next week.
Yeah, and I think also something to point out, and this is what the YouTube chat is discussing right now, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. Join the conversation at youtube.com/957thegame. Lori Matthews brings up, anytime your quarterback is sacked 6 times, generally that means you're not going to be able to go through all your reads. And again, we could argue maybe Aiyuk should be higher up on the, number 1 option, like depth chart. Like maybe he should be more often number 1 option. But it's also the reality that he joined this team 2 weeks ago, and they're 2 games in already. Like this is not an easy thing to get that up to speed that quickly. If the offensive line was better, I'm sure Aiyuk is targeted more. I'm sure Aiyuk has more yards, and obviously the Niners score more points. A lot of it all comes back to the offensive line, and that's a part of this as well. Again, if you want to argue that Aiyuk should be the number 1 read more often, that's fair, and he should be when he's fully ready to go. But I think there's also truth to the fact that he's just simply not 100% ready yet. I mean, he admitted this past week, leading up to this game, Sterling, that he was scared to watch the tape from week 1 because he knew how bad he played. I mean, he didn't have a drop today. I'm not saying he played really terribly today. He was okay, wasn't special, certainly nowhere near all-pro level. Now, it's also important to note, Sterling, Aiyuk has games like this sometimes. He explodes, and then he kind of just is, And part of that is the Niners' offense. When you have McCaffrey, and you have Deebo, and you have Kittle, you have so many mouths to feed. I remember it last year. Week 1 in Pittsburgh, he had 2 touchdowns in the first 2 drives of the season. I don't think he had another touchdown until like week 7 or something. Like this kind of the Brandon Aiyuk experience at times. He's a hell of a football player, but he does go through these kind of stretches sometimes where it's kind of hit or miss. And right now, whether it's just the natural progression of things or it's because he reported very late for this season, he's in one of those periods where he simply misses a few times. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Go back to the offensive line. Had the offensive line played as good as they did against the Jets last week, I guarantee you Aiyuk has more than 4 catches and 5 targets. The offensive line was terrible today.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal against the Jets. It was so good, it was ranked inside the top 20, and it hasn't been that good for 4 years. So, they were terrible today compared to last week, including Trent Williams, who wasn't terrible, but he wasn't on his A game. But had this offensive line been the same offensive line performance as last week, no one's talking about where was Brandon Aiyuk. Purdy would have had plenty of more time to find him down deep.
Yeah, no doubt. Back out to the phones we go. We're going to get to Shanahan coming up on the other side. Too many calls to get to. We love it. Keep them coming. 888-957-9570. Up next is David, who's in San Antonio. What's up, David? You're on Overtime with Grant against Sterling. How you doing?
Hey, what's up, fellas? Tough game today. I'm not too concerned, especially looking at what happened with the Cowboys, the Lions, what's going on with the Rams, especially with them being at home, us on the road. But I totally thought that Shanny and Sorensen specifically just got totally outcoached and outclassed today. How many third and longs did we give up today? They went for first downs. The 98 yards to Jefferson after the 4th and goal shutdown. It was just ridiculous. I thought Purdy was mediocre at best. I thought he was holding on to the ball way too long. The sacks, I thought, were more on Brock, but also wide receivers just not getting enough separation. I thought Mason was a dog today, but the difference between Mason and McCaffrey is Mason's just not a threat on third down, and coming out the backfield where McCaffrey, McCaffrey's special. He's offensive MVP, but Mason's just not that threat to catch a ball on third down where McCaffrey is. And Mason ran hard. I love the way the dude runs, but he's just not that threat. And, he gets big yards, but he's just not a threat to go, to be explosive. But just the not getting separation from the wide receivers was just really concerning to me. And I thought Sorensen, he coached an F of a game today for me. But that's all I got, fellas. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, appreciate the call, David. I'm not so sure I'd go as far as an F. The defense wasn't up to their standard. I don't think it was absolutely terrible. There were some absolutely terrible moments. David is right, though, Sterling, about the third downs. Minnesota, I talked about it on that drive that sealed the game where they go up by 2 scores in the fourth quarter with that long drive that resulted in a field goal. They had 3 third down conversions on that drive that kept the drive alive. Overall in the game, 7 for 12. Minnesota was on third downs, and I don't have all of them plotted out in front of me, but I would venture a guess of those 7 conversions, at least 4 were probably like 3rd and 6 or longer. There were some back-breaking conversions for the Vikings, and that was a big reason why our caller's right. The Niners defense, in those big moments, in those big plays that turn a game, that decide a game, it was generally the Minnesota offense, Kevin O'Connell's play calling, beating out Nick Sorensen and the Niners play calling.
Well, that's what the NFL comes down to. Good offenses continue drives on third downs. They extend drives on third downs. Good defenses get off the field on third downs. You could argue this game simply came down to getting off the field on third down for the defense. Had they stopped the Vikings on 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 7 on their last drive of the game or their second to last drive of the game, they have a chance to go down and win the game. For the Niners, their offense was not good on third down. 2 for 10. They couldn't sustain drives, and they couldn't get off the field on third down. That is the most pivotal drive in all of sports, at least in the NFL.
Yeah.
If you can't get off the field and can't continue drives, you're not going to win games no matter how good your offense or defense plays that day.
Yeah, recipe for disaster, no doubt. All right, time for a break here on Overtime. We got plenty more time for your calls, and we got to hear from Kyle Shanahan. We'll hear that coming up next. Also, Niners players, of course, have talked. I'm sure they're disappointed. We'll hear some of that as well. As Overtime continues, it's Sterling, it's Grandy with you on Overtime on 95.7 The Game. More coming up next.
Did you know that most people wait 6 or 7 years before they buy a new TV? That's a lot of time in front of one TV. So why not get one of the best sets for the next?
Now back to overtime with Grandy, Madsen, and Bennett with sounds from the locker room and your calls at 888-957-9570. Overtime continues now.
Yeah, welcome back. No Kyle Madsen today. He'll be back next week. So it's Mark Grandy and Sterling Bennett with you holding down the fort here on Overtime. And who knows, maybe Kyle Madsen is the Niners' good luck charm because he was here week 1. The Niners dominate and win. Gone week number 2, and the Niners look as bad as they have in a long time. They fall to the Vikings. Final score of 23-17. That highlight you just heard, courtesy of the NFL on CBS, called by Kevin Harlan. Originally called an interception. It was officially changed to a fumble. Brock Purdy, I'm not sure if he was trying to pull the ball back or his thumb slipped and the ball just squirted free. It came free before he started moving his hand forward, but popped into the air and then was caught. But officially, that's a fumble because it was not a forward pass. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter. It's a turnover. The Vikings get the ball back, and that was consecutive turnovers in that third quarter for the 49ers. And that was where this game really turned, Sterling, because the 49ers, after all of the issues of the first half, included a 4th and goal from the 2, failed, followed by a 97-yard touchdown catch and run for Jefferson. The Niners still went into halftime, Sterling, only down by 6 points. And then you come out and you force a stop immediately to begin the third quarter. The Vikings won the toss, deferred to the second half, so they got the ball to begin the third quarter. You get a stop. You get the ball right back, and I don't know how you were feeling. I was thinking, okay, now you go down, score a touchdown, you take the lead, and this game is going to turn right there. But you come out your first possession of the second half. You get a first down, a Mason nice run. Kyle Juszczyk a toe tap along the sideline to move the chains. Then Purdy sacked. Mason backwards, -2 yards. Purdy sacked again. You punt. You ultimately get another stop. And then you get the ball right back, and then that's where those 2 turnovers happen. So the Niners offense really let them down in that third quarter when their defense got them 2 stops, Sterling. The defense got 2 consecutive stops to open the third quarter, but the offense could not get anything going. And to make matters worse, they twice put their defense in bad spots with turnovers, both turnovers by Purdy, by the way. And that was kind of the game. You did have an opportunity in the fourth, but hard to overcome that third quarter when you felt like maybe the momentum was shifting and then the offense stuck in the mud and turning the ball over. You just simply can't have that and win football games.
It felt like there was directly after the Warner interception, they go down, they score. Okay, that's how you steal momentum. Yep. Halftime, you walk in, okay, great. We're in a really good spot here. You stop the Vikings at a halftime. Okay, this is where San Francisco goes on their run to inevitably take the lead, then hopefully run away with this thing. And every time it felt like they were about to get a first down or about to get a touchdown, they got a flat tire, a drive stalled, it was a sack, it was a incompletion. It was a lot of penalties and pivotal plays in this game. Deebo Samuel is killing drives. We've had a couple of holding calls so far. It's just like, gosh, like, I don't know about you, but I wanted to pull my hair out. It was just like, we are better than this. Like, we are playing down to an opponent that we will likely not even see in January. That's why it's so frustrating, because it's like, we've seen this team almost win not 1, but 2 Super Bowls. We've seen this team beat the brakes off of the Cowboys and the Eagles. We've seen this team, even pre-Christian McCaffrey, dominate the NFC West. But you can't beat the Vikings with Sam Darnold? Like, and it's no disrespect. The Vikings played a great game. They have one of the best coaching staffs in football. Brian Flores, he's an A-plus coordinator in my mind. Kevin O'Connell always has his guys ready to go, whether it's Darnold or Cousins, or last year it's Hall and Joshua Dobbs, Nick Mullins. It does not matter. Those guys are ready to go each and every game. But this is a game that, whether it was preseason, offseason, dating back to 3 days ago when we do the predictions, everyone picked San Francisco of like, yep, they have the mojo. They're going to make it a point to, without CMC, be aggressive, get out in front of this game and hold this one till the end. Get out and get the win and say, look, we're 2-0. Instead, it was, You were just stuck in the mud trying to get every yard you possibly can because the Vikings defense is smothering your offense. Your receivers can't separate. Your offensive line isn't holding up. Honestly, just the Vikings, you kicked their butt, man. You got us. You got us good and you got us early. Kudos to you.
Yeah, 23-17 was the final. The Vikings are 2-0. The Niners are 1-1. They beat the Jets, and they fall here on the road to the Vikings. Okay, let's hear from Niners head coach Kyle Shanahan postgame addressing the media after this rough loss. Here is what the Niners head coach thought about everything that happened today in Minnesota.
Was there something about the way you expected this game to go that made you more willing to go for those 4th downs?
No, didn't mind the decision in those situations, where we were at on the field, right, just outside of field goal range, the down and distance, and then I don't mind going for it inside the 2, knowing that we'll pin them back. They made a hell of a play to get out of there, but didn't like the results, obviously.
Was the Jefferson play a coverage thing, or was it just...
No, it was just beat a man coverage, and they launched the throw and got it past the middle third safety, which made it a house call.
You guys got it to 20-14. They didn't have Jefferson on, so they were playing without Addison. How disappointing was it to not come over the stop?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, they got us on 3rd down. We had a couple opportunities to get off the field. So they made a couple good throws, and they were good on 3rd down all day. So we had our opportunities with those turnovers that they got, but he made some big plays, and it was tough after that.
We talked about the plays. Fred won and made very much fun every last night.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 turnovers were huge. That's what gave us a chance. I mean, both of them were just like what he did versus the Jets. He made a good job in zone, reading Sam and getting the pick, but then not giving up on that screen and knocking that ball out was the same as last week.
It seemed like an emotional physical letdown after such a good week 1. Do you attribute that just to the short week, run?
No, there was no emotional letdown, nothing like that. I attribute it to not doing well on 3rd down. We didn't stop their run very well, and block punt, things like that, football things.
I guess one finish in the end zone more last week too. Is there anything you put your finger on why you're not able to finish drives right now with touchdowns?
We didn't convert on 3rd down. When you go I think we were 2 of 9 on 3rd down, which usually doesn't lead to touchdowns very much unless you're doing it all on 1st and 2nd. 1 of 3 on 4th down doesn't help. I think we finished, on that last, we were 2 of 4 in the red zone. So it was a challenge today, and we can do better.
How would you assess
some good things, some bad, kind of like the whole team, all of us.
Can you pinpoint why the offense has started slow in back-to-back weeks?
No, there's not a theme for you guys. You have to go over the 3 plays that we had last week and the 3 plays we had this week.
It seemed like your guys' pass protection was pretty good for a lot of the game, but then, once you guys started getting predictable, what can you do to better protect the quarterback when you're in those passing situations time and time again?
That's why we tried really hard not to get in those situations. When you do, that's why football becomes a lot harder. There's times you can chip, which we did, things like that, but they also have very good blitz scheme, caused a lot of confusion, give them a lot of credit to it, and just got to keep working.
Did you feel pretty hopeful when they got the ball with the 6-point lead before they got the field?
Yeah, I did. Felt real good that, the day had been tough. And then once we were able to get that turnover, go down and score and make it a 1-possession game, felt real good. Got them in some 3rd downs. I think we, had the advantage in, but they made some big 3rd down plays, kept the chains moving, and finished it with a field goal.
17 points in this save 2 years in a row. What is Brian Flores doing to limit this offense?
He does a good job. They were number 1 in the league last year in run defense. Looks that way this year. Thought we ran the ball pretty well, but that doesn't always score you points. You got to cross the end zone, and they mix it up a ton. He did a real good job, and we made some mistakes that cost us. And when it's like that and can't overcome those turnovers, the block punt, things like that, it's just credit to them.
With Christian going on IR, is that something you've had to address with Jordan, or is it kind of unspoken that he's the guy and you have to give him maybe kind of words to get him going?
No. Jordan's didn't have to last week either. He just does what he's been doing since he's been here. We've had 2 guys go down already, so I think it's pretty obvious to him that he knows he's starting when that's the case.
What's your read on how long Christian might miss it or dad missed before?
Nobody knows. We're dealing with tendonitis, so there's not one person knows. He doesn't know. We don't know. We're going to take it day by day. If I put him on IR, it's at least 4 weeks, so that'll give him some time to rest and kind of protect him from himself, us too. And no matter how he's feeling, it's 4 at the minimum.
Is there any surgery he needs, or is there any sort of specialist or anything that he's going to start?
He does a lot of that stuff.
Obviously, you didn't want it to happen against you, but seeing Sam out there and him being successful, what kind of through your mind?
Didn't surprise me. We knew we were up for a challenge. Sam is a hell of a quarterback. He's got a lot of arm talent, and we also knew just scrambling-wise it was going to be a different challenge today, and he got us in a couple scrambles, too, that he's done that his whole career. He's done it in college, and we knew we had a challenge with him.
It's Kyle Shanahan earlier today, post-game in Minnesota, addressing the media after the 49ers fall to the Vikings 23-17. Certainly a couple of things that stood out to me. based on what Kyle Shanahan was talking about. Of course, he was asked about the 97-yard Justin Jefferson touchdown, and he said, was that just a breakdown in coverage? Was it a bad call? What happened there? Is simply a great player making a great play? And he said, well, that's just Justin Jefferson beating man coverage. I don't know what you felt when you heard him answer that question. My follow-up would have been, do you like George Odom matched up on Justin Jefferson? Because that's a matchup Sterling that I want to avoid at all cost every single play in this game.
Well, it's not like George Odom is, one, your best safety in the room. It's Jair Brown. Two, he's never the player you want to have on any opposing team's top receiver. Mooney Ward, Lenore. Honestly, at this point, I think I'd rather have Renardo Green and you just say, it's a rookie, he got beat, whatever. But George Odom, who I like George Odom, he's a phenomenal special teams player. I will say this, and I mean it all due respect. There's a reason he is primarily a special teams player. He's a fine vet to have. He wasn't noticeable against the Jets. And look, it's not like Justin Jefferson, outside of the one catch, was having a phenomenal game. He caught the ball 4 times for 133 yards and 1 touchdown. That one play was essentially Justin Jefferson's output in this game.
Yep.
But yeah, Kyle, maybe don't put your backup strong safety on the best wide receiver in football.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson, 4 for 133 and a touchdown. Important to note, he did go out in the second half and did not return. Yeah. I think that Kevin O'Connell was calling it a quad issue for JJ, and he's officially day-to-day at this point. You'll probably know more tomorrow, the next day. If you have him on fantasy, fingers crossed for you. You never want to see one of those stars go out for an extended period of time, and he missed a lot of time last year. So hope that he's okay. But you're right. Without that 97-yard touchdown catch, that's 3 catches for 36 yards over the rest of the game, over every other play but one. That's a pretty good job defensively. But when you have a star player like that, and sometimes the game of football can come down to one play. When you have a star player like that, all it takes is one sometimes. And Justin Jefferson made the most of it. It's just unfortunate for the Niners that the one time maybe they fell asleep a little bit, it was when they were 97 yards to be gained, and Justin Jefferson, you give him that opportunity, he's going to take every single one of those 97 yards.
Land, that play in particular, and it's not as if the deep ball has not hurt San Francisco's safeties in the past, whether it was Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tard, and mainly when it was Gibson and Hufanga. When you have players like Jair Brown and Hufanga, they want to play towards the line more. They want to be these stumping, playmaking in the box safeties, and they're usually slower players that are susceptible to the deep ball. It's happened the last couple of years, and so seeing that isn't a surprise. Seeing San Francisco get beat deep isn't a surprise, but it's when the opposing offense is on their own 1 or 2 yard line where you can put 7 to 8 guys in the box and play man coverage and say, hey, we're going to bank on our guys getting some pressure. First off, nobody got pressure. Second off, Sam Darnold was in a clean pocket with room to step up and make that play. Nobody did their job on that play. Not just George Odom. We're talking Bosa, Hargrave, Collins, whoever else was in there. They're on the 2 yard line. Get a hand up. Put a hand on somebody in the Vikings offense of line. For as bad as they were against the Giants, ranking 29th coming into this game, played a really, really good game and gave Sam Darnold plenty of time to throw almost all day long.
Yeah, they did. A quick note before we get back to other things that Kyle Shanahan said. We do have a development from Arizona where the Rams are currently getting absolutely boat raced by the Cardinals. It's 31-3 early in the third quarter now, by the way, and another injury for the Rams. Cooper Kupp is doubtful to return. They already lost Puka Nacua last week, Sunday Night Football, and he's been placed on IR. Cooper Kupp, his return is doubtful. We'll try to find a little bit more news on exactly what it is. Looks like it's an ankle injury for Cooper Kupp. So
that's not good.
That's not good. It's not good for, that Rams team is already dealing with an insane amount of injuries. They lost 2 offensive linemen week 1. They lost Puka Nacua week 1. Now maybe they've lost Cooper Kupp week 1. I will break the news. Cooper Kupp will not return today. They're down by 28 points. Just don't play him the rest of the game. Chalk this up as an L. Start 0-2 and hope that he's okay and maybe ready to go for the Niners week 3. Niners will not necessarily terribly miss Cooper Kupp if he does not play next week. But that is something to keep an eye on for the 49ers, of course, because Cooper Kupp's availability and the Rams in the division certainly that affects how this Niners season could play out, Sterling.
Yeah, I mean, that's to take it even further than that. While the Rams may be kind of in this, this limbo situation, let's say Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua don't play next week. San Francisco, you have no excuse not to beat the brakes off of the Rams. Talk about needing a get-right game, if you will, for this Niners team after today's loss. If you're playing the Rams that have 3 offensive linemen out, no Puka Nacua, and no Cooper Kupp, you better win next week in Levi's South, and hopefully you can get right and people can get off the world is crumbling. San Francisco is 1-1 or 2-1 at this point. Hopefully they can get back to who they were after the Jets win in week number 1 if Cooper Kupp is not going to play in week 3 against San Francisco.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so back to what Kyle Shanahan was talking about. We already broke down what he said about the 97-yard touchdown by Justin Jefferson. Also talking about what's kind of hurting the 49ers on offense. He talked about 3rd downs, 4th downs, and red zone. Sterling, those are 3 very, very big things, specifically 3rd down and red zone. And you look at what the Niners have done so far this season, it has not been great. And today was much, much worse than week 1, of course, when they scored 32 points against the New York Jets. And they won 32-19. Today they lose 23-17. But the Niners today, Sterling, on 3rd downs, 2 for 10. Compare that to what Minnesota did, 7 for 12. On 4th down, they were 1 for 3. The 49ers were. Minnesota did not need to go for a 4th down. And then in the red zone, the 49ers 2 for 4. This is where the Niners defense actually stood tall. They were 1 for 3. The Vikings were on their red zone appearances. But now for the 49ers, Sterling, through 2 weeks, in the red zone, the Niners are 4 for 9. That means 9 red zone appearances. 9 times you've had the ball inside the opponent's 20-yard line. You've only scored a touchdown 4 of those 9 times. And that is like opposite of what last year was. The Niners were the best red zone offense a season ago. A big part of that, probably Christian McCaffrey. Maybe a big part of that as well is Brandon Aiyuk. And the Niners up to this point, Sterling, for whatever reason, have really, really struggled. And it's why I think you, I, and Kyle Madsen last week all struck the right tone because the 49ers struggled in the red zone. And while they did score 32 points, Sterling, you had plenty of room to grow. And why I think we were kind of pointing to that as a reason to maybe be a little bit worried. And today was more of the same. The 49ers just 4 for 9 in the red zone so far this season, 2 for 4 tonight.
And the offense has struggled in the first quarter. Last year, San Francisco, I think, hadn't scored on a first drive all but maybe 1 or 2 games last year. They were stellar, excellent, number 1, number 2 team in football at getting ahead of opponents early and continuing to score throughout the game, almost never letting up and always having a lead. This year, they've never had a first quarter lead. This year, they, I believe, are shut out in the first quarter in totality. And if they have scored a first quarter point, it's 3 points.
It was a field goal week good. 1. Yeah, correct.
Okay, so they have 3.
Off
3 points
off the Fred Warner forced fumble on Breece Hall week 1. Yeah, that was it.
Fred Warner making plays. Who would have thought the offense not being able to pick things up? Shocker. That's who they've been through 2 weeks of the season so far. And, this is not who they were last year. And I'm not overly concerned of San Francisco not finding themselves, again, if you want to call it that, or the offense, having issues throughout the year. Christian McCaffrey being absent shouldn't decimate your offensive production, but I do think there is something to say of the offense with Christian McCaffrey, obviously more dangerous. Someone has to step up if he's not going to be out there for, let's say, the next 6 weeks, or if it's that bad, post-bye week, pre-Buccaneers game, I think in week number 9 or 10. So it's not as if San Francisco doesn't have the weaponry. Like, Kyle Shanahan is supposed to be a genius. And what rubbed me the wrong way in this game in particular was the fact that last week, Shanahan's calling the purr dog play. They're trying to run trick plays left and right when your offense is actually moving the football. Where in this game, your offense is stuck in the mud, can't do anything, and Shanahan's like, hey, jam it up the middle for the next 5 plays. Let's hope we can get something to work here. And I get each game's different, but it's like if there is a game to dive into that bag of tricks really deep and pull something out of your you-know-what, this is that time to say, hey, we got to get 7 points here. Let's do some trickery or let's pull something out of the hat and see if it works. There was none of that today. Yeah. Now, maybe it was out there and you just couldn't see it on the broadcast. That's fine. But it felt like San Francisco, again, including Kyle Shanahan, it was like, here's the game plan. It's not working. And we don't really know what to do to fix it. And that's horrifying because they're not going to have CMC for 6 more weeks.
You think it's going to be that long?
I think so. I think San Francisco underestimated the injury initially, and I do think Christian McCaffrey's Achilles tendonitis, that is scary. That thing can pop and linger for a long time. Fingers crossed it doesn't get worse, but I think people are not understanding how serious this can be. He can come back in week 10 or whenever it is and be out week 11. This thing could be a massive issue the entirety of the season.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm not so sure exactly how long it's going to last, but it's also an injury where, I'm not so sure how much you can be thinking about future seasons, Sterling, but it's also an injury where, say, God forbid, he pops his Achilles, like when he comes back week 6. That puts next year in jeopardy. Like, this isn't just a 1-year thing either. So you don't want to sacrifice this season for the sake of keeping him healthy, hopefully for next season. Like, this is a really important season. But if you do rush it, you might not just be costing yourself this season. You might be costing yourself next season. No, he'll play when he's ready. You don't know exactly when it is. I have a bigger problem, Sterling, with why he was even out there practicing on Thursday before this game anyway. I mean, he tried to give it a go on Thursday, and according to Kyle Shanahan, he said Thursday was, quote, his worst day in terms of pain that this entire experience has been for him. Why is he even out there trying to get ready for this game? Take a week off. We were hearing from so many people, Matt Barrows of The Athletic talking about it, other people talking about it. Christian McCaffrey's rest isn't really like rest. Like, he's still on it and he's still working out and he's still trying to get right. Christian, get off your feet, bro. Like, I know it's difficult for you. You're a busybody. You got to stay moving, but it's Achilles tendonitis. You got to give it the rest it needs. And, maybe I don't know exactly what I'm talking about and how this injury is impacting him. And maybe he did really feel good enough to go on Thursday. And then it was just unfortunate that he tweaked something and it got worse. I would be much more willing, Sterling, to sacrifice a week or two than now get into a position where we're looking at a 5, 6, 7, 8 game absence for Christian McCaffrey and hope that it's all right back then. I don't even want him touching the practice field at all this past week, and that's what made it worse, apparently.
Well, then go back to, apparently he had the injury in the playoffs last year. Okay, he gets injured, he plays through it, great, you gutted it out, you didn't win it all, but fine, you gave everything you had. Then he has the entire offseason to rest. You're off your feet. You got married. You had a good time. You're probably in that California king bed more than you want to say publicly, but by all means, good for you, brother. It's like you're not doing much. Then you have a couple of weeks of practice, and all of a sudden it flares back up. You can't do much, and he's out there pushing and pushing and pushing it, and it's like, Christian, just stop. I get it. You want to be out there with the boys in the huddle, but for the sake of your season, the team season, and this team's opportunity to win a Super Bowl, just take a sabbatical, have a rest. If you have to go to Hawaii, kick back, my friend. Do whatever you got to do. Just get off of your feet to preserve your own health. No one's asking you to dog this thing out and gut this thing out in week 2 of the NFL season. Hey, lost today, it sucks, but I'll take a loss today if it means Christian McCaffrey's healthy for weeks 8 through the Super Bowl and it's a win. That's all I hope what happens.
Yeah, I'm with you. He is way, way, way too valuable to be risking anything with him. Even if you think it's probably going to be okay, it's going to be safe, don't risk it. He's too important and too good of a football player to risk that kind of thing. All right, time for a break here on Overtime. When we come back, we'll get back out to the phone lines. Jerry and Edgar, I see you on hold. Stay there. We're coming to you first thing when we come back. If you want to join the conversation, give us a call, 888 957-9570. That's also the Xfinity mobile text line. It is overtime here on 95.7 The Game. The Vikings upset the Niners in Minnesota. The Niners haven't won in Minnesota since 1992. What the hell is going on? It is 23-17 Vikings over the Niners today. More OT with Grandy and Sterling next on 95.7 The Game.
So, how's your research going?
Surprising. After I figured out the top-rated TVs in our price range,
To Paula, the long snap. And Wright, the punt. And Cowing, the rookie. Fair call. Oh, dropped it at the 10. It's loose. It's live. It's been covered inside. The Vikings, I think, have gotten it. Let's see. Maybe it was still squirming inside.
I think Cowing ended up coming back to get him a pound.
Now back to overtime with Grandy, Madsen, and Bennett with sounds from the locker room and your calls at 888-957-9570. Overtime continues now.
Yeah, it was actually Isaac Yadam that recovered that muffed punt by Jacob Cowing, the rookie. Not great. Didn't turn into a turnover right then, but very quickly after that, Brock Purdy would turn the ball over, and it would turn into a touchdown for the Vikings, and that's how the game kind of got away from the 49ers. And that era, that period of the game, Sterling, I think kind of defines the kind of game that this was. The Niners just simply making too many big mistakes to win this game. Like, you can find positives to point to. Jordan Mason, a second consecutive 100-yard game. Fred Warner is not just playing like all-pro Fred, but playing like Defensive Player of the Year Fred Warner. He has forced 3 fumbles in 2 games, and also 2 of them have been recovered by the Niners. He also has an interception. He has a sack in this game. You have reasons to be excited. You've seen some other things. I think Malik Collins maybe wasn't as good in this game, but you're all right with how the run defense has been through 2 games. Like, there's reasons to be excited and encouraged, but these major mistakes in this game, I don't really care what team you are. If you have the full team healthy, and if you have the most talent in the NFL, if you're a Pro Bowl roster, you make the kind of major mistakes that Niners made today, Sterling, it's going to be really, really hard for you to win a football game, and that's what played out for us today.
And also, you add on the expectations we have for them, where it's like Super Bowl caliber, going to be an NFC champion once again, number 1 seed in the NFC, and they come out and lay an egg like that. It's like watching the prime Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant, Curry, and Draymond and Clay, and they come out and they lay a stinker against the Mavericks, and you're like, huh? How'd this happen?
They were so good, and the NBA schedule is such that you could just like take 10 different nights off throughout the course of a season and you'd be totally fine. But you can't do that in the NFL.
No, you can't. And it's like, okay, like if you're the Niners, again, you have to win every game. Or, not every game, but you have to be in position and put yourselves in a place to at least be in every game. And yes, they were technically in this game. But if you look at from a component of the Vikings may have won this game, but San Francisco certainly played down to them. The Vikings played well. The defense played well for them. The offense did their job. But San Francisco made the critical mistakes to keep them and their lead preserved rather than overtaking them and actually separating in this one. We've known what this team can do for a handful of years. Losing to the Vikings, albeit, is become all too common in Minnesota since 1992. It should never be accepted. I think that's where I'm at, where it's, okay, winning in Minnesota is tough for us. They have maybe an underrated team, a quarterback playing the best he ever has through 2 weeks of the NFL season. It's young. It's early. The Rams are going to be 0-2. Seattle's 2-0. The Cardinals are 1-1. The world's entirely upside down right now. Which way is up? Which way is down? Who knows? But we expect so much more from this roster. And I can guarantee you they're going to walk back in that locker room and they're going to say, we expect more from ourselves. We have to be better if we want to beat even a Rams team who may not have Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Like, you can't just waltz into Levi South and be like, well, this one's locked up. Easy peasy. Got the dub. That's what leads to games like this. And not to question San Francisco's effort, but you can definitely tell there was a black cloud over their head in this one from the jump. Go back to, I believe it was the Vikings' first drive of the game, 3rd and 3. Here we go. Sam Darnold thinks he's going to make a statement. We're going to stuff him right here, and we're going to knock these guys at the ground, and we're going to score some points. The dude gets a spin move around Javon Hargrave and runs for 15 yards and a first down. I immediately put my heads in my hand and said, this may be a long one. If he's doing that stuff, it's going to be a long day for San Francisco, and ultimately it led to a loss. So need to be a little better next Sunday if they want to get a dub.
Yeah, next Sunday the opponent is the Rams. The Rams have just scored their first touchdown of the game in the final minute of the third quarter, but they are down 34-10 in Arizona to the Cardinals. So the Rams, as you said, will be 0-2. The Seahawks will be 2-0. It is maybe the least impressive 2-0 of all time. They beat the Broncos in Bo Nix's debut, starting quarterback for the Broncos, barely in week 1. And then this week in New England, although maybe New England is better than we think, although I'm having a hard time believing that, they need overtime to beat New England. They win that one 23-20. So they are 2-0, but with wins over the relatively hapless Broncos and Patriots, both close games, one of them in overtime. So Seahawks are the leaders in the NFC West right now. The Cardinals and Niners will be 1-1, and the Rams will be 0-2. I'm not sure that's how anyone predicted that the NFC West would be through 2 weeks, but it's not necessarily a super long season. It's very young right now. It's early. There's plenty of time to make up some ground if you are the 49ers. Okay, back out to the phones we go as overtime continues. It's Mark, Randy, Sterling Bennett with you. The Niners fall to the Vikings 23-17, the final. Jerry has been hanging out patiently on hold. Jerry's in San Francisco. What's up, Jerry? You're on overtime on 95.7 The Game.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
We're trying to make sense of this loss, Jerry. What about you?
Yeah. I think our views on games are colored by assumptions of what should happen and expectations that are born out of, prior years and the preseason. And one of your previous callers said, we don't know who the Vikings are. And I think, that's a critical point. We make an assumption that the Vikings, it should be a W. But the Vikings had an excellent offense last year. And on defense this year, Brian Flores finally got to bring in his own set of guys. We got 5 new starters on defense to go with that good offense. And at the end of the day, it's these games are decided by small margins. And I think, I hope personally, I'm a Vikings fan. I hope the Niners will look back on this loss as a loss to a really good team on the road and not feel bad about it as in this moment in time. We'll see how it all plays out. But it's like you said, the world looks upside down right now, but some of it's real, and you just don't know what you're going to get at the start of a new NFL season.
Yeah, Jerry, before you go, I want to ask you, what do you think the Vikings are? You think this is legitimately who they are? Are they a good football team?
I think they're an excellent, well-coached football team. I'm a little worried about Sam Darnold. I don't think he's kind of he looked a little bit like a headless chicken at times. But otherwise, as you said earlier on in this game, this could easily have been a 20-point loss for the Niners. We played really well. Credit to us. The credit to you guys. I wouldn't be down on Brock Purdy. I think he's an excellent QB. And I certainly shout out to the 49ers fans. I've never seen so much color, not purple, in the Metrodome unless the Packers are in town. So that was staggering.
Yeah, appreciate the call, Jerry. Sounds like, I know you're a Vikings fan, but it sounds like you don't have too many biases there. I think he's seeing it relatively fairly. I didn't think Brock Purdy was terrible. I don't think he was bad. I think he was okay. He was fine. But the reality, Sterling, when we're talking about the Niners quarterback and we're talking about how he performed last year, and we have in our mind what this team is capable of, and we have in the back of our mind the idea that at the end of this regular season, he's going to be eligible for a record-breaking contract extension. The reality, Sterling, is that just good or okay is not good enough. Like that's the reality that you have to have this conversation in. Like that's the context that matters here. And Brock Purdy, again, I don't think he was bad by any stretch of the imagination. 2 turnovers. One was a weird, fluky play. The other, maybe he was a beat late, and it was a really nice play by the linebacker. But yeah, 2 turnovers, that goes on Purdy's ledger. I think for the most part, the reason why the passing game was a little bit stop and go and herky-jerky was less about Purdy and more about the Vikings defensive backs doing a great job on the Niners receivers and pass catchers. But the reality, Sterling, is we hold Brock Purdy to an incredibly high standard, and he did not come close to meeting that standard today.
We don't just hold Brock to an incredibly high standard. I think most Niner fans, or if not all of them, would say you were a top 5 MVP finalist last year. the expectation coming into year 3 as a starter is you're going to be better. Now, you may not be the MVP. No one's predicting that here. At least I'm not. But today, in the last 2 weeks, has not been a Brock Purdy MVP-like performance that we've seen in previous years. And yes, to Horace Bird's a comment on the YouTube chat brought to you by First NorCal Credit Union, the Vikings defense did look very fast. They did tackle well. Credit goes to the Vikings. They came to play today.
Yeah.
They made a statement early. We came into their house saying, hey, we should win this game by 16, 15 points. If you had asked me before this game started, I would have said San Francisco should put up 30 points on a secondary like Minnesota's. And they said, that ain't going to happen here, bud. You're going to go ahead and take a seat and watch what happens. And they put on a clinic of how to tackle a team like San Francisco. There wasn't many plays where Debo and Kittle were running free down the sideline after breaking 2 or 3 tackles. They did a great job in this one. But Brock Purdy, there were a couple more throws that probably should have been picked off or could have been picked off. I don't know what's the reason for that, but Brock really has shown to be a much better quarterback than he has shown in the first 2 weeks. I think that's kind of where I'm at, where we've seen you be great. So far, you've been okay. But I want to see you be great again. Because once Brock Purdy can become the quarterback he was last year, this offense has no bounds. It has no heights it can't reach, even if Chris McCaffrey's not going to be out there. Brock Purdy has shown that, he doesn't need Chris McCaffrey out there every single game to be awesome. He can utilize Aiyuk and Debo and Kittle and Juszczyk. There's too many weapons to just be okay. And I think week 3, week 4, week 5 is a really good opportunity. Rams, bad defense. Cardinals, bad defense, albeit a pretty good offense so far. And the Patriots, who, although are playing better, I think aren't going to be great when it's all said and done. You have 3 weeks to get this thing right and hopefully get Purdy back to his MVP almost winning ways.
Yeah, Brock Purdy today, 28 for 36, 319 yards, a touchdown, 1 interception, also lost a fumble. It was originally ruled an interception, but goes down officially in the scorebook as a fumble. So 2 turnovers for Brock, 1 touchdown, his first touchdown pass of the year, 319 through the air. Here's Brock Purdy talk about the Vikings defense that he went up against earlier today. Here's Purdy.
How difficult is it going up against that scheme, especially when you're trying to dig yourselves out of the wall?
Yeah, it's tough. First or second down, aren't positive plays and, just trying to move the ball. And then, you got to rely on third down with, their scheme and obviously their disguises and stuff. It can be tough. And, they just did a good job with making it look like one thing and it was another and different types of blitzes and stuff or just dropping out. So they did a lot. That's just on us. It's on me to move the ball, be efficient on first and second down and get us in third and manageable and then convert on third down. So it's a game of football. It's 4 quarters like that. And, we had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, Sterling, the 49ers got behind the chains pretty often this one. It's a big reason why they were 2 for 10 on third downs. They were often facing 3rd and 6 and 7 and 8 or even more in this one. And while you feel like you'd like to convert at a higher rate than 2 for 10, even on those 3rd and intermediate or 3rd and longs, you make it that much more difficult on yourself by not having success on first and second down. That's what the sacks did. There were a couple of negative runs for Jordan Mason. Overall, the run game was fine. 20 carries for Mason, 100 yards. You average 5 a pop. You'll take that every single game that you're out there. But there were a number of negative plays. And when you do that, I don't care how good your passing game is, it's going to be difficult to convert those. And maybe you could also look at maybe some of the play calling. Shanahan came out really aggressive in this game, maybe a little bit more than normal, and he was passing the ball early, not running all that often early in the game. I don't think Mason had a carry, definitely not the first drive. I'm not sure if he did the second drive either, but the 49ers kind of went away from it early, and then you kind of get behind the chains if the passing game isn't working, and then you got to try to get it all back at once. It was like that all game long where there just wasn't a rhythm. And aside from a couple of long drives, which didn't feature big chunk plays, it featured kind of a slow grind, 5 yards here, 3 yards there, 4 yards there, which works. It got them all the way down to the goal line. They didn't score, but it got them all the way down there from deep in their own end. There wasn't really a moment where you felt like the offense got into a rhythm and was just reeling off chunk play after chunk play after chunk play, which we've become accustomed to seeing from this group.
The Niners, to my count, had 5 to 6 plays, not including sacks, that were negative plays. And if you are continually in first or second and long and third and long, you're asking a lot of Brock Purdy to go up against the defense that can play 8 guys back and just sit at the first down line and say, hey, come beat us. That's really hard to beat no matter the quarterback. Now, unfortunately, there were a handful of times in this game where Sam Darnold did just that. I went back and through my notes, I think I saw there were 5 to 6 third downs that were 3rd down and 6 and more that were conversions for the Vikings.
Yep.
Whereas San Francisco felt like almost every single drive, every single 4 set of downs they had, it was 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. To a point where Kyle was like, we have to go for it on 4th down here. There's even times in this game where Shanahan was setting up for shorter 4th downs, knowing, hey, we have to go for this here. So I'm not sure if it's the game plan. I know last year the Deebo Samuel wideback stuff wasn't working. It worked okay against the Jets in week 1. Didn't see a lot of Deebo Samuel as the wideback today. Maybe that was because they wanted to attack the Vikings secondary and test them early, albeit wasn't the way in which many of us thought they were going to deep downfield, more the intermediate routes, which is fine, but definitely questionable. But I will say this, I am tired of seeing the Deebo Samuel screen pass when they have 7 to 8 guys just sitting there waiting for it. Last year, defenses knew, okay, if Deebo Samuel's in the backfield, they're going to run the football. It didn't work. They had to stop utilizing it. This year, it's a lot of Deebo Samuel screen passes. I don't want to see it anymore. It's happening too often, through 2 games. Everyone knows, hey, if Deebo Samuel's lined out wide, he likely becomes a screen pass as soon as he doesn't run 1 yard in front of him when the ball is snapped. And when that happens, you have plays like the last drive of the game for San Francisco or penultimate drive of the game for San Francisco where it's almost picked off by Van Ginkel. Like, you cannot have those plays in clutch moments because those are timing plays. Those are hike, balls out. Okay, the last thing you want to see is the linebacker standing right in front of it. That almost happened today. Let's do something else. It obviously wasn't working. Let's change the script somewhat and maybe get more vertical, especially at the goal line in the red zone. I know you can't get too vertical, you're out of bounds, but it's like everyone knows what's coming. Let's show some creativity from the genius that is Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, and I also think that's where you lose me on the Aiyuk conversation about whether it's Shanahan being, I don't know, playing politics in the wide receiver room or being upset about how the offseason went and the negotiation, that he's punishing Aiyuk purposefully, or that Brock Purdy isn't looking his way, because whatever. This game was absolutely begging for someone to open up the field. And the way you do that is by beating your defensive backs down the field a couple of times. And in terms of Niners that have that in their bag, it's Brandon Aiyuk and then like a giant gap before you get to anybody else. So like this game was begging for Brandon Aiyuk to do that. And if you do that, then the defense has to respect that, and it opens things up over the middle, and a screenplay to Deebo, a quick over the middle to George Kittle, Juwan Jennings, who had a couple of big catches again in this game. That's how it opens things up. So again, I'll just say, if there is anything untoward happening about Brandon Aiyuk other than this is just him trying to get into a rhythm, then the whole 49ers coaching staff needs to be fired because they lost them this game if that's how this happened. Yes. I guarantee you that's not how it happened, because if Aiyuk is playing at an all-pro level, this offense looks a little bit different and it opens up everything else for this offense. Now, with that said, it is on Brandon Aiyuk to get back up to speed as soon as he can. Not that he's without blame here, or that the Niners aren't without blame for letting it get to this situation, but it's the reality, and now you got to get past it as soon as you can. Back out to the phones, 888-957-9570. Edgar is in San Antonio. What's up, Edgar? You're here on Overtime on 95.7 The Game. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing, Dale, fellas?
We're doing all right, man. What's up?
Hey, I just wanted to quickly point out a few things. I think, as a Niner fan since I was about 8 years old, there is an expectation. And even this year, there's a great expectation, because of the simple fact that, again, how many Pro Bowlers do we have on our team? How many former Pro Bowlers do we have on our offense? And how many Pro Bowlers does the Vikings have?
Not as many.
I mean, we're just talking we're just talking about Jordan Jefferson. And the one thing that bothered me a little bit was the fact that you're going to put Odom one-on-one with the best wide receiver in the entire league. I'm still baffled at that one. But there is a silver lining. The silver lining is this. We got the Rams next week. It's a get-right game, fellas.
Yeah, Edgar, I mean, you better hope so. The Rams are as beat up as anybody early in the NFL season right now without a couple of offensive linemen and without Puka Nacua for sure. Cooper Kupp doubtful to return for their Week 2 game right now, and they're getting absolutely whooped in Arizona. 41-10 is the score now in favor of the Cardinals with 9 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. You better hope it's a get-right game. What's interesting, Sterling, is the Niners have often played the Rams in kind of like do-or-die moments in the regular season. Yep. This isn't necessarily a do-or-die moment. You obviously don't want to be 1-2, but the Niners have oftentimes gone up against the Rams, whether it's at home or on the road, coming off of maybe the low point of their season, and it has always been the Rams that gets them playing their best football and gets them back on track. This is kind of early in the season to be talking about that, but if you are looking for some kind of positive correlation, the Rams, to our caller's point, to Joshua's point, the Rams have kind of been that get-right game for the Niners in the past.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just playing a familiar opponent. You can get back to who you are. You're going to be back in California. It's technically a road game, although it's basically a home game at this point. Going to be a lot of red.
Yep.
Going to be a lot of red down there next Sunday. And look, the Niner fans travel so well. They were there today in Minnesota. A lot of red. I think Vivid Seats said it was like 36% red, but it felt like a lot more. You definitely heard Go Niner chants late in that fourth quarter when they were mounting their eventual non-comeback, hopeful comeback. But next week should be... It better be a get-right game for San Francisco. You have to get the offense going. Kyle Shanahan, even if it is as simple as just let's run the football 35-plus times like it is against the Jets and let Brock Purdy be efficient. Like last year, Brock didn't need a high sample size or sample rate to be great. Brock was, I'm going to throw the football 25 times. I'm going to have 2+ touchdowns. I'm going to keep drives alive with my legs and being a playmaker and do things that other quarterbacks just can't do. He was the most efficient deep ball passer in the entire NFL last year with the least amount of attempts. It's not like he needs 25 shots downfield a game. Just a couple here or there, and hopefully Deebo Samuel, who hates the Rams, is like, look, I'm seeing red this Sunday, and it's not just in the stands. Hopefully Aiyuk is saying, okay, I've been pretty bad through 2 weeks. This is my reemergence in the offense. And if it is, that game will be heralded as, wow, you buried the Rams. They're 0-3 now this year. You've almost erased one of your supposed toughest opponents. You're also back on track. Now go crush New England and the Cardinals, and hopefully you have won 3 games in a row, taking it to a team like the Dallas Cowboys or the Seattle Seahawks in Thursday Night Football in Seattle. So tough loss today. Not a lot to glean from and say, oh, wasn't that bad. But there is some hope maybe around the corner for this team to get right.
Yeah, and maybe to one of our callers' original points or earlier points as well, maybe you look back at this loss, not that it's ever going to be deemed a good performance or acceptable or anything, but maybe 6 weeks from now, the Minnesota Vikings are 6-2, and they're leading the division. The Lions now are 1-1, and the Packers are without a quarterback right now, although they won with Malik Willis, who actually looked decent against the Colts. Oddly enough, I'm not so sure how many people were expecting that. I played the Colts defense in my fantasy league because I figured Malik Willis going to throw 3 interceptions, and he was good, and Josh Jacobs ran all over everybody. Whatever. Don't care about my fantasy team. It is what it is. But, suddenly you might be looking at the Vikings as maybe a team that is sneakily in postseason contention, and you look back at this loss in a handful of weeks as, maybe a little bit more understandable. But on the flip side, you are the 49ers, and you're going to be favored in nearly every single game that you play this year because you just simply have more talent than everybody else. This is never going to be a good performance. Don't get me wrong there, but maybe the way the rest of this season plays out will kind of change how we feel about this game weeks down the road. Okay, time for a break here on Overtime. When we come back, one final segment to get to. We got to hear from Brock Purdy because he talked about what we've been talking about. Brandon Aiyuk, is he open? Is he in the right spots? We'll hear from Brock coming up on the other side as Overtime continues. Also, Sterling and I have to give out game balls. It's a little more difficult in a loss. Maybe we'll give out some game balls for the Vikings. You'll have to stay tuned to find out. That's coming up on the other side as Overtime continues. It's Sterling and Grandy with you on 95.7 The Game.
Are you curious about who offers the best deals on top-rated Samsung, LG, and Sony TVs? The answer
First down and 10. They get by Darisaw. Bosa devours Arnold. A sack right there for Nick Bosa. First
now
of the
back
season.
To overtime. with Grandy, Madsen, and Bennett, with sounds from the locker room, and your calls at 888-957-9570. Overtime continues now.
That's a sackaroonie, baby.
Yes, it is. Nick Bosa, one of his 2 sacks, his first 2 of the year, but it was all for naught. The 49ers fall to the Vikings 23-17. I appreciate Ken, though, as we get to our final segment of the show, Sterling, trying to give us a little bit of positivity. A Nick Bosa sack instead of another Niner terrible mistake coming out of a break called by Kevin Harlan, of course, on CBS. That's what today has been, Sterling. It's been frustrating. A lot of bad plays, bad mistakes, bad decisions by the San Francisco 49ers. There were 2 turnovers by Brock Purdy. There was a blocked punt, which, by the way, there's been so many block punts around the NFL early in the season. It's been weird. I know the NFL has been debuting the dynamic kickoff. Did I miss a punt block rule change? Because everyone is blocking punts these days in the NFL.
Well, first off, if you're going to say Nick Bosa's name, you got to say it like Kevin Harlan. Bosa!
Bosa!
Bosa! He called the game today, then did like the mid-game highlights.
What was that about?
Game.
Oh, my God.
And then you let Nate Burleson say, I can't hear anything while the highlights being played. It's like, all right. Like, working in radio, we know exactly what that's like, but still, it was pretty cool to see live. But yeah, some positivity. I was surprised. Ken's been asking me, what should I come back with each time? And I'm like, I don't think there are many Niner highlights to play, so just play all the Vikings highlights at the beginning half of the show, because everyone wants to be negative. But let's end on a brighter note. We'll get to game balls later, but yeah, let's have some fun, be positive. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but it certainly ain't raining over here just yet, so we're doing okay.
Yeah, no doubt. Oh, no doubt. Brock Purdy, I talked about this, teased this going into our last commercial break. Brock Purdy asked about Brandon Aiyuk. We've spent so much time discussing Aiyuk and is he up to speed? And if he is it, back in the doghouse for how the offseason went? Is it Brock Purdy simply not seeing him? Is it he's the second or third read and Purdy's thrown to the first read as he should if it's open? What's going on here? Brock, what do you think about Brandon Aiyuk? Is he getting open down the field? How would you evaluate him through 2 games? Here's what Brock Purdy said post-game today.
I think he looks pretty good and stuff, but I don't, I'm drawn back going, BA's not like what he's been like. I don't think that at all. I think for me, I just try to go through my reads, and he's been where he needs to be. And, there's probably a couple routes maybe in certain looks where we both could have been better on some stuff, but that's just like, early in the season stuff, if you ask me. So I know that we'll continue to get better together in our connection and everything, but for 4 quarters, man, I thought BA grinded and, went and competed, man, and I'm proud of him for that.
So Brock Purdy isn't worried, saying the right things there. I got distracted immediately when that soundbite started playing because he is picking up on all of the Kyle Shanahan isms. The number of times he says "and stuff" in that cut, it sounds like he's Kyle Shanahan. He says, yeah, I think BA looks good and stuff. That is directly out of the mouth of Kyle Shanahan, so I was a little bit distracted listening to the rest of that soundbite. I'm sure he didn't say anything crazy, Sterling, because Brock Purdy never does. But we have so many knowledgeable football minds saying that Brock Purdy executes what Kyle Shanahan wants to a T better than any other quarterback ever has. He is also picking up on the Kyle Shanahan vocabulary and mannerisms. He is truly becoming a clone of Kyle Shanahan, the way that he talks as well.
So what you're saying is, middle of the game, we're going to see Kyle Shanahan hug Brock Purdy, and they're going to morph into one human being.
Yeah.
And Kyle Shanahan will finally become that quarterback of the Niners he's always wanted to be. Because it kind of what it sounds like you're saying, that Brock Purdy is becoming Kyle Shanahan, or at least a mouth for him, if you will.
No doubt.
Which I'm not sure if it's a good thing at all. Kind of scary, to be honest with you. I don't mind them seeing the game the same way, but I don't think I want to have 2 Kyle Shanahans in the media. It's terrifying. Terrifying to watch. We used to do a segment on the night show, Dan Devone and Alan Stiles, where it was Kyle Shanahan. How many times would Kyle say in the first 15 minutes of his press conference? And you're like, Kyle, it's been 60 seconds. You said 17 ums. What's going on, man? So hopefully Brock doesn't get that bad, because editing that thing is a mess. Sorry, Ken, but good luck.
Yeah, not an easy thing to do. But ultimately, if we're getting past how he said it, what he actually said is, Oh, but yeah, he grinded out there for 4 quarters. This is just early season stuff that we're going through. He has to say that as the quarterback of the team. He's not going to throw anyone under the bus. By the way, what Aiyuk went through this past offseason is something that he's going to go through next offseason. Hopefully it's not nearly as dramatic as the Aiyuk one was. So he's not going to say anything out of line. Of course, we know that. But Brock Purdy is not worrying about Brandon Aiyuk. He said there's things that both of us maybe can get better at. But again, he said that's just early season stuff. It's normal to have that kind of thing happen in week number 2. What is maybe a little bit concerning if you are the 49ers, Sterling, or if you're a 49er fan, is, okay, Brock, fair. Like that's all entirely fair. But you think back to last year when Brock Purdy was recovering from a UCL tear. He had no offseason, did not get to throw with Aiyuk or anybody really all offseason. And he had a relatively normal camp in preseason, I know, but it was a lot less normal last offseason than this offseason, even with the Aiyuk and Trent drama. And you came out week number 1 and absolutely dominated one of the best defenses in the NFL. Then you go to LA week 2 if memory serves, and you win that game. It was more of a hard-fought game. Then you have Thursday night at home against the Jets and put on an absolute show. You weren't Giants. You weren't missing a beat early in the season last year, despite it being a tumultuous offseason for you personally. Now you come out, you have a regular offseason. Again, no Aiyuk, but you have a regular offseason for you, for the quarterback himself, and you kind of have this clunker offensively in week number 2, and you say it's just early season stuff, that's okay, but the early season last year, you were passing with flying colors, no doubt about it.
When Aiyuk had, 2 touchdowns against the Pittsburgh Steelers, it was, oh my goodness, Aiyuk's going to get paid big money once it's all said and done. And I think Aiyuk got hurt against the Rams and then didn't play against the Giants.
That's right.
It wasn't perfect, but for Brock Purdy, he came out throwing darts all over the place, looking like a quarterback number 1 and a top 15 guy. Now he's probably a top 10 guy, but he doesn't have to answer these questions about Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings got a brand new contract. He was there. I wonder why, of all the people on the roster, Brandon Aiyuk's the one getting singled out. Oh, that's right, because he wasn't there and is not up to speed just yet. Brock Purdy said the only time they truly had to throw was when they had a single practice. Nobody else was out there. Him and Aiyuk went out there by themselves and got a few balls and started throwing it around. They didn't have a training camp. And if you know, receivers are one of the most important positions to get that timing right. Quarterback and receiver. If it's not there, you're going to see struggles like this. You're going to see a player of a Aiyuk's caliber who is awesome. Everyone wanted to pay Brandon Aiyuk. He's awesome. They want him to be here and be a mainstay in this offense for the next 4 or 5 seasons. But so far, there is a clear-cut reason as to why he's not been BA of the past couple years, because he wasn't there for 4 months and has to cram 4 months of preparation into 2 weeks. That's impossible. You're not going to see that BA. Hopefully it's against the Rams, but I was going to assume it's not going to be for maybe 2 more weeks until we finally see Brandon Aiyuk of the past few years.
Yeah, and to everything that you're saying, it's why I think so many people, myself included, that I actually don't know for a fact if you felt this way, but I'm sure you did. It's why so many of us were so much more worried about Aiyuk's holdout or hold in than Trent's holdout.
Yeah.
Because obviously you would like to have both of them there. One, Trent is like 36 years old and he's a future Hall of Famer, and you just trust him to know what he needs and know kind of when his body clock is going off and know when he needs to be ready. And the offensive line was bad today, and Trent is a part of that. He shares some of the blame for that, no doubt about it. I'm sure he was still probably like the best out of the group, because that's what Trent Williams is. He's one of the greatest offensive linemen to ever play this game. But everything you're talking about there, the timing and the rhythm and just the physicality of being able to cut and to push off, slyly off of defensive backs and all of that, it's something that you obviously have internally in its natural ability, but it is also something that, it's the same as any other skill. If you don't work at it for a while, you don't get it back up to the level that you're used to, you're going to be starting from square one. And all those sorts of things that a wide receiver does, it's a little bit more of the buildup than, say, the back pedal of a left tackle and, him shoving someone else into the ground. Like, that's difficult, and I'm obviously very much so making it sound easier than it really is. But that's why so many of us were so much more concerned about Aiyuk's holdout, not necessarily because of importance to the team, because you might argue Trent more valuable than Aiyuk. You certainly could argue that, and I wouldn't be one to argue against you. You could feel either way you want to feel about that. But when it comes to who needs the time to get ready more, it is undoubtedly the wide receiver versus the offensive lineman. And I think through 2 weeks, although the O-line was not good today, that has held true. Aiyuk seems a little bit more rusty than Trent Williams at this point.
And we've seen this before. Nick Bosa last year took him a little bit, didn't feel right really until the middle part of the season after the bye week against the Jags, which his defense was incredible against. But we also saw it with Deebo Samuel. Mm-hmm. And he was signed far earlier than Brandon Aiyuk was.
Yes.
And Deebo will tell you himself, the first year of that brand new contract, he wasn't good. He openly told the media, I never want to put that performance on tape ever again.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot tell me through 2 weeks Brandon Aiyuk wants to say, yeah, I played pretty good. No, you didn't, Brandon. And Aiyuk is by no means the reason why they lost this game. It's just to say that they're going to need Brandon Aiyuk to step up and hopefully be a cog in this machine and be the Brandon Aiyuk of the past few years that has the most touchdowns, the most targets, and be this team's top receiver again if they're not going to have Christian McCaffrey. And even if they are going to have Christian McCaffrey and they want to win a Super Bowl, Aiyuk still got to be that guy. You're not going to win a Super Bowl with Deebo Samuel being your number one receiver in a guy that can't separate against man coverage. You just can't do that. You got to have a guy like Brandon Aiyuk out there with Juwan, with Deebo Samuel, with hopefully Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle. It takes all of these players. It's 11 on 11, not 1v1. They need all these guys to come together, and hopefully that starts by week 3 because we all expected a slow start to the year, but you need to pick it up. Before you know, you can be the Rams, and we're going to be 0-2.
Yeah, maybe we expected a slow start in terms of not looking like the world beaters you did for a lot of the regular season last year, but still picking up wins.
Yes.
You lose today, and you're now 1-1. You fall 23-17, and now you go to the Rams on the road next week, and they are beaten up, and they have, they have officially lost, by the way. Final score in Arizona, 41-10. So the Rams are 0-2. They're 0-2. You can, the overtime loss to the Lions last week, fine. That's a really good Lions team who lost to Tampa today, by the way. But Arizona absolutely blows the doors off of the Rams, 41-10. Cooper Kupp injured, did not return, but looks like an ankle injury. Stay tuned tomorrow here on 95.7 The Game. If we get any sort of major news around Cooper Kupp, we will, of course, keep you updated here on 95.7 The Game. But Sterling, we've got about 10 minutes to go here in overtime on 95.7 The Game, which means we got to get to game balls. You can go in any direction you want, whether it is Niners or Vikings. I know we've had some awful Niners performances in the past where we have just said, you know what, screw this. Let's go to the opponents and hand out game balls there. I'll let you do whatever you want. We will start on the offensive side for either team. Pick either team, whatever is speaking to you. Who gets a game ball for you on offense in this Vikings 23-17 win over the Niners?
For the sake of the show being titled Overtime and it's a Niners postgame, I will lean towards the Niners in this one. How about George Kittle? George Kittle is often, well, not forgotten, kind of the lost man in the rotation. He'll go a couple weeks with one catch, then he'll explode for 3 touchdowns against the Cowboys like last year in prime time. In this game, though, 7 catches, 76 yards, almost 11 yards per catch. The lone Brock Purdy touchdown pass of the game came in clutch a handful of times. Why not George Kittle? Didn't even play the whole game. Who knows what else he could have done in the fourth quarter. So George Kittle gets my offensive game ball of week 2.
I like that. I'm looking through the game log really quick because I remember at least a couple of George Kittle third down catches. Yep. He had a 3rd and 6 conversion early in the game, went for 10 yards. He then also got 11 on a 3rd and 14 that set up the 4th and 3 conversion. That doesn't count as a third down conversion, but Kittle was big there. He had a catch of just 3 yards to set up the 4th and goal from the 2, and ultimately that failed. But George Kittle was targeted consistently, and this is just like that one drive, Sterling. I don't have time to go through the rest of the game log. George Kittle was consistently targeted on 3rd down, and at least at the early point of this season, Kittle does seem to be Purdy's go-to target when he has those big moments, and Kittle was good at that today, so good pick. Offensive game ball for me. I'll stick with the Niners as well. Jordan Mason definitely deserves a shout. 2nd consecutive start, 2nd consecutive 100-yard game, 20 carries, 100 yards, 5 a pop, and a touchdown. Had a 22-yard scamper. He caught 1 pass for 4 yards out of the backfield. Again, 1 catch last week, 1 catch this week, but solid as ever on the ground. I'm a little concerned, Sterling, which is why I wanted to see a little bit more Debo in the backfield. I'm a little concerned about Jordan Mason holding up for an extended period of time, dealing with 20-plus touches every single game just because of the physical way that he runs, and he has not seen this many touches week in and week out since college, and he's now in his 3rd year in the league. Without McCaffrey for, at the very least, 3 more games, I know you think it's going to be maybe more like 5 more games. Without McCaffrey for that long, you got to make Mason last. And I'm not saying you give multiple carries to Isaac Guerendo, a rookie who looked good in the final preseason game, but you really don't know what that guy is. But I'm a little concerned about getting to a point where maybe Jordan Mason begins to wear down just a little bit because he's that physical of a runner. All in all, though, we did not see that impact him today. He was great once again, 5 yards to carry, 100 yards and a touchdown. He gets the game ball from me, Sterling.
Yeah, I don't want to say he's made people miss Christian McCaffrey or make them forget about him because we all miss Christian McCaffrey and want him back out there. But Jordan Mason, I think, has, through 2 games, proven to be, at least in the short sample size we've seen so far in 2 weeks of the NFL year, one of the better running backs in the entire league so far, which it certainly helps to have, Trent Williams on your left. And despite maybe his pass protection not being very good, Colt McKivitz is a pretty good run blocker, and you have Kittle and Debo opening up lanes for you. Jordan Mason was also stuffing dudes trying to get to Brock Purdy for a couple of times in this game. So the improvements we've wanted him to make and Shanahan has wanted him to make are definitely being put to use on the field almost every single game so far this year.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, on to the defense, Sterling. Who gets the game ball for you defensively?
There's a clear-cut Niner one, and I'm not going to pick that for the sake of I want to continue to give Brian Flores his flowers. Okay. I know as a head coach, didn't work out for him very well in Miami for a variety of reasons, many of them not very good. But his defense today had 6 total sacks, 8 tackles for losses. They were getting their hands all over the football, got to the quarterback 7 different times. Of course, had the fumble recovery and the interception. They were just mauling this Niners offensive line that I think we all thought was pretty good against the Jets and looked to be an improved unit as a whole. Coming out of week 1, Brian Flores will certainly tank their PFF rating, probably pretty low when it's all said and done. So I do want to give Brian Flores flowers. And honestly, if we're being more specific, Pat Jones, the second out of Pittsburgh a couple years ago, 2 sacks, 2 TFLs, 2 quarterbacks hits. He was making Brock Purdy realize that I'm not going anywhere in this one. It was in the backfield a lot in this game, no matter which side he was lined up across, whether it was Trent or Colt McKivitz in this afternoon's game.
Yeah, he was awesome in this game. I'm not going to give my game ball to this guy, but another Vikings player to shout out. Blake Cashman, one of their linebackers, he was everywhere. 13 total tackles, led all players in this game, had a sack, and it was his pass deflection on that target to Juszczyk over the middle where Purdy was maybe a split second too late. Cashman read his eyes, came running over, knocked it away. It bobbled up into the air and ultimately was intercepted by, I think that was Metellus, I believe, for the Vikings. Yeah, it was Metellus, one of their defensive backs who ultimately came up with it. That play was created by Cashman. He was awesome, and you're right. Credit goes to the Vikings defensive unit and Brian Flores for that. But I'll pick the obvious one that you shied away from, Fred Warner. The Niners lost this game by 6 points, if Fred Warner did not exist or was out for this game, they would have lost by 20. He was the reason this game was close. 9 tackles, led the team, had a sack, had an interception, forced 2 fumbles, one of which the Niners recovered. The Niners scored 17 points in this game. 14 of those 17 came off of turnovers forced by Fred Warner. Not just turnovers forced by the Niner defense. Turnovers forced by Fred Warner. He gifted them the ball a couple of different times, and that's when the offense took advantage and scored 14 of their 17 points. The only points the Niners offense scored that did not come off of a Fred Warner turnover forced, either an interception or his forced fumble, which was recovered by Yadam. The only 3 points the offense scored not off of a Fred Warner turnover, Sterling, was the final drive when the Vikings were content giving the Niners 20 yards underneath every single time, and even still, they couldn't get into the end zone. They kicked a field goal, and those were the only points the Niners scored not from Fred Warner forced turnovers. Thank you for leaving me that layup. Fred Warner gets my defensive game ball.
I really thought you were going to pick George Odom for a second. For the Vikings fans, he certainly gets the game ball today. He gave him a touchdown for 97 yards.
Yeah.
But, is there really any other most valuable player through 2 weeks of the NFL season, despite a loss in this one against the Vikings, other than Fred Warner? He has been the most valuable Niner thus far. The offense was off to a slow start last week. It was Fred that got the offense going, put them in a position to get a field goal, not a touchdown. But in this one, again, essentially was the defense and the offense. He was stellar so far. And in the absence of Dre Greenlaw and also D. Winters, I'm surprised he didn't play today, but picking up the pieces of that linebacker room, Fred Warner has not erased the desire to see Dre Greenlaw out there once again, but he has picked up the slack almost by himself.
Yeah.
He has been phenomenal to a point of, I know there's players that have, 5.5 sacks, like Aiden Hutchinson and Max Crosby was great today. Fred Warner should be somewhere in that Defensive Player of the Year conversation this early in the NFL season.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. Speaking of Fred Warner, we got to get out of here in a couple of minutes. Fred Warner was asked post-game about the 97-yard touchdown catch and run by Justin Jefferson. And in classic Fred Warner fashion, he's saying he's got to do better. Here's Fred on that play.
During a man coverage blitz, I was one of the guys that was blitzing, and I got to get home to get some pressure on Sam. He's able to step up in the pocket and deliver a great ball to Justin, and we just got to find a way to get him down right there.
Cover 0 blitzes against the Vikings in Minnesota. What could go wrong? Am I right, Sterling?
You gonna put Nick Sorensen up in that box next week? He was so bad today. Shanahan's like, I don't want to see you anymore on the sideline. Go up in the booth.
Yeah, if you don't know what we're talking about, there was the infamous call at the end of the first half, Monday Night Football in Minnesota last year, where the Niners, of course, Steve Wilkes called an all-out blitz essentially, and Jordan Addison ripped the ball away from Mooney Ward and scored on a last-second, 60-yard touchdown or whatever it was. And that was the beginning of the end of the Steve Wilkes era, Sterling. It began in Minnesota. The beginning of the end began in Minnesota, and hopefully this is not the beginning of the end of this Niner defensive group. I'm sure it won't be, but kind of funny the way that the world works. You kind of had a similar play call, cost you big time in this game as well.
I mean, hey, the Vikings are haunting the Niners.
They really
1992. 1992, I wasn't even thought of. My parents weren't even dating. They were like, I don't know who Sterling is. He's somewhere in the world, I guess. I don't know. I wasn't even thought of. They haven't won since 1992.
32 years ago, Sterling. 32
pain.
Years ago. It's a long time.
Straight pain.
Yeah, it is. Hopefully next week will be less painful. The Niners travel to L.A. to take on the Rams Sunday, the 22nd, a week from today. That game might be close to wrapping up. Exactly 1 week from now, it's a 125 game down in L.A. Probably will be in the fourth quarter at this point. We will join you for overtime. Kyle Madsen will be back. 1 week from now, we'll be gearing up for hopefully an overtime that follows a Niner win. They're 1-1 so far this year as they fall to the Minnesota Vikings today by a final score of 23-7. Sterling, it's been a pleasure as always, and we'll talk next week, huh?
Dude, it better be a win. If it's not, I'm going to start yelling very loudly.
And that's not a joke. He will do that. He will do that. Sometimes Niners losses, I'm not ever rooting for them, but it is fun to see Sterling's reaction at times. But I do not want to put him through that emotional turmoil ever again. So Niners, hopefully you win the final 15 games of your season, and we'll call it good at that point.
Let's not put my wife through that for the next 15 weeks.
Good point.
She will not be happy.
Yeah, good point. All right, Sterling, we'll catch you up next week.
See you, man. Have a good one.
See ya. Yep. All right, that'll do it for us here on Overtime today here on 95.7 The Game. For Ken and Cam behind the glass, for my partner Sterling, my name is Mark Randy signing off. Thanks so much for tuning in. Niners fall in Minnesota today, 23-17. Our coverage is ending today, but make sure you're locked in all week long on 95.7 The Game. Bright and early tomorrow morning, Bonte and Shasky 6 to 10, Steiny Goo 10 to 2, Willard and Dibs from 2 to 6, reacting to a rough Niner loss. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll talk later on 95.7 The Game.
So what are you reading?
I'm checking out the ratings on the new TVs, and it looks like Samsung, LG, and Sony got the best scores.
Just like last year. What about those new